This is a Sony Handycam. And about 3 decades ago, it featured an upgrade that changed the world. It wasn't the screen or the viewfinder, and it didn't replace this thing. It was the battery. The lithium-ion battery, to be exact, which was lighter and more powerful. And it was about to set off a massive change in consumer technology.
Suddenly, Sony had in its hand this product that was selling like hot cakes that it wanted to put not just in the one camcorder, but in every device it could find.
Over time, the price of batteries went down, and the power they packed went up.
And what we know from Wright's law is that the more you make something, the cheaper you can make it.
Fast forward to the 2020s, and batteries had improved in power and cost so much that they helped kick off another electronic revolution. This time, in automobiles. Now, just like with consumer electronics, batteries are helping make EVs more affordable, driving adoption around the world.
You're not driving a car, you're driving a battery. And China right now is the leader in batteries.
China's EVs are already cheaper on average than similar gas cars. And it's no surprise that 4 of the top 5 battery makers in the world are located here. Also, one of them, BYD, has been jockeying with Tesla for years for the title of the world's biggest EV maker. All that success means lots of competition at home, propelling China to look outward for expansion. And while some big markets like the US and the EU have resisted China's cheaper EVs, many emerging markets have brought them in.
They're kind of upsetting the chessboard of global power. No pun intended. Sorry.
That's okay. I love a pun. China's dominance in global lithium-ion has sparked companies worldwide to recharge efforts in battery technology, from new chemistry to production techniques, in an effort to disrupt the status quo. And with great power comes, well, a great opportunity for profit.
It sounds like distant thunder. It feels like the sound of money.
When you drive an electric vehicle, that car is powered by the movement of teeny tiny electrons, a clever bit of science that converts chemical energy to electricity. Inside a lithium-ion battery is a system built of layers. The cathode is on one side, often made up of a special combo of metals. And then there's the anode on the other side, usually made of graphite. In an EV battery, charged lithium atoms, called ions, move from one end to the other. And their electrons take the scenic route through an external circuit, creating the flow of electricity that makes the car go vroom quietly. Between them is the all-important separator, because if the two ends touch, well, you get the picture. And the batteries are filled with a liquid electrolyte, which helps the ions flow between layers. But here's the thing. China's cornered the market on every one of these components. This is Sam Artem. He's a research analyst on the battery industry and knows a lot about the ins and outs of its supply chain.
A lot of people assumed that we just dig up the raw materials and then we put them together in the battery cell, right? But in reality, this is a very complex, interwoven supply chain.
Let's take lithium, for example. I mean, it's in the name, right?
So things like lithium can be found in places like salt flats of Chile, the hard rock mines of Australia. Miners extract raw materials from the earth. And then those raw materials are shipped to refining plants, which are usually in China, to be processed into the refined chemicals and the powders that are actually useful for making batteries.
Lithium is refined into lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide. And this processing step is where China has really created a bottleneck. Just look at how much China controls each part of a battery.
That battery cell gets grouped together into a battery module or battery pack that goes into your smartphone, your electric car, or into a grid-scale battery energy storage system.
In addition to that supply chain, the Chinese government poured hundreds of billions into subsidies for the EV industry.
Basically, as early as 2001, the Chinese government wanted batteries and other advanced technologies to become a bigger driver for the economy. And it was in 2015 when they came up with this Made in China 2025 plan, where they made batteries along with EVs and robotics as strategic priorities for the future.
They started out with public buses, making those electric. They had all kinds of sticks and carrots. It's hard to get a license plate for a new car, but if you buy an EV, you can get one faster. You know, things like that encourage people to buy electric cars. And all of that kind of state support that kind of created this stable environment in which new battery and EV companies could thrive, because they knew that long-term there was going to be demand for the product because the state was behind it.
That sustained support, combined with a vertically integrated supply chain and a talented pool of engineers, helped Chinese battery companies commercialize an overlooked bit of battery chemistry and crack the code on cheaper EVs. Just how cheap? Well, in China, one of the most popular EVs is BYD's Seagull. It's tiny and only has a range of 190 miles. Compare that to one of the cheapest new EVs in the US, the 2026 Nissan Leaf. It has a range of about 300 miles. The difference, though, is in price. You can buy about 3 Seagulls in China for 1 Leaf in the US. And part of that is because the Seagull uses a cheaper battery, lithium iron phosphate, or LFP. FYI, we're about to talk about a lot of initialisms. They may be a PITA, but they are the SOP in the world of EVs.
A lot of the innovation with lithium-ion batteries now has to do at the component level. On the cathode, there was the lithium iron phosphate cathode, LFP, developed by Americans but scaled up by China. It used cheap raw materials like iron and phosphorus, but it had a bunch of limitations. It couldn't store a lot of energy, whereas the nickel manganese cobalt cathode, or NMC, was a lot more energy dense.
Even though NMC packed more energy, the cheaper LFP cells showed promise.
And so chemists began making tweaks to LFP batteries with small chemistry changes, small structural changes, and every year the LFP batteries started to become a little more energy dense. And because China was the place where LFP batteries were finding its most development, they also lowered in price faster than NMC batteries did. So today, most electric cars produced in China are powered by LFP batteries.
And they're still improving. Last year, Chinese companies announced that their newest LFP batteries can recharge in about the same amount of time it takes to refuel a gas car.
That technical innovation goes hand in hand with the supply chain.
But they've hit some bumps in the road. For years, China was investing heavily in domestic EV supply chains. But thanks to overcapacity and price wars, 2024 was the first time Chinese companies invested more overseas than at home. But we'll get to that later. Meanwhile, other players are hoping to disrupt the dominant technology and compete on the global stage.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest, and this is Bloomberg.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Burr.
I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Christina Ruffini. We're tracking breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington.
Let's start overseas. The sector is really propelling this deal forward.
Yeah, the hope is this will open up new markets and provide some additional liquidity.
Of course, now they're going to have competitors. We got a
Big week coming up in politics.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Introducing Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
General Motors, founded in 1908, is one of the OGs of the internal combustion engine. They also built one of the world's first modern electric cars, called the EV1, all the way back in the 90s. But GM cancelled the project after heavy losses. Since then, GM's made headway when it comes to EVs. And now they're trying to kickstart a new kind of battery technology.
We've got a chemistry that we think is going to be really competitive. It's a leapfrogging of what they've got in China.
This is Kurt Kelty. He's a Tesla veteran who's been working in batteries since Sony introduced lithium-ion to the world. Now, Kelty and his team are betting on a new kind of chemistry called LMR, or lithium manganese rich. Another initialism, I know.
So this is the final form of the LMR, cathode active material. It contains all the added pixie dust that is going to make it work optimally in a vehicle.
That pixie dust is a new cathode mix that boosts manganese, reduces nickel, and nearly eliminates cobalt. GM claims that the shift in chemistry lowers cost without losing too much range.
So with the Silverado, we're getting 492 miles. That's with a high nickel cell. If you end up using an LFP cell, you're going to get about 350 miles of range. Well, if you use LMR, you're going to get about 400 miles of range. So it's in between them.
GM hopes to launch commercial LMR batteries for SUVs and pickup trucks in 2028. They're also hoping to bring their supply chain closer to home.
What we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years is trying to reduce our reliance on FEOC-based countries, including China. And the most challenging part has definitely been the cathode material. It's the most expensive part. The graphite has also been challenging. Our intention is to have this all outside of China by 2028.
GM has invested in several projects to build up a battery supply chain in North America. Shifts in policy have cost GM billions and can make it harder to establish a supply chain.
The problem is every 48 years, the United States does 180 and have a totally different policy. The government certainly didn't make it easier on them by changing course every so often.
Mr. President!
This sucker's quick. You know, they're having a hard time, the electric vehicles, and they want us to pay billions of dollars in subsidy.
I don't think the U.S. car companies can compete with China right now, but I think if they have a chance at it, they need to continue to innovate. It's definitely an uphill battle.
GM isn't alone in its experimentation. Startups around the world have raised billions to find the next best battery.
I don't think the future is at all settled, and there's lots of different chemistries. I like to think of them as ice cream flavors. Everyone's trying out different combinations to see what works best.
And it'll take a lot of trial, error, and money to see what new tech actually succeeds. Meanwhile, Chinese battery companies are expanding all over, even here.
So in 2006, Gotion was founded in Hefei, China. But today, the company has expanded into the U.S. market, with the first factory being here in Manteno, Illinois. We are going to be making LFP batteries, or lithium iron phosphate batteries.
Gotion is one of the world's largest lithium-ion battery makers. Its new Midwestern facility will make batteries for EVs, energy storage systems, or ESS, which are used to supplement the electric grid, and this thing.
Grab this bad boy, plug it in. That's it.
In the past few years, Gotion built several overseas facilities around the world. And now it's flipping the script on an old American tale.
What are the biggest challenges of setting up a factory in the U.S.?
There's a lot that goes into building a factory, and even a company that has built many factories before, it's not just simply a copy and paste.
When it comes to manufacturing, the US is a bit rusty.
You have to build something from scratch that hasn't been here before, or it hasn't been here in decades. That know-how and technology and that manufacturing experience, that's things that the U.S. used to do. We decided it wasn't important anymore and outsourced it. And that's been the model for the last, 50 years or so.
Enter international collaboration.
It's perfectly possible to make batteries outside of China reasonably cost-effective. And one of those pathways is actually working with the Chinese companies.
Collaboration helped Chinese manufacturers get to where they are today. In the 90s, China implemented the 50-50 rule. Foreign auto firms could only operate through a joint venture with a local company. The car companies expanded their markets, and the Chinese counterparts got knowledge spillover. Goshen's Illinois factory has 300 employees, with plans to scale up to 750 by the end of 2026. This is the man responsible for pulling that off, Mark Krusel.
So I've been in manufacturing my entire life. So ever since I was 23, I see this as a great opportunity to bring this type of manufacturing to the U.S. I don't want to see the U.S. be left behind like we were being left behind.
A key part of the modern American factory? Lots of robots.
So this is a very highly automated plant. Goshen's most automated plant to date, we call it Generation 7. So they had Generation 6 in China, and we have Generation 7 here in the U.S. The first thing is you get better consistency, better quality with automation. And secondly, we get to reduce some of the manpower costs. So automation is a little more cost-effective in the U.S. than in China.
Goshen's expansion is part of a larger trend of Chinese companies setting up factories outside of China to capture new markets and avoid protectionist tariffs. But the company's U.S. expansion hasn't all been smooth driving.
Many people throughout Michigan came to today's rally, voicing their concerns of the company's ties to China and the environmental effects.
3 years later, Goshen's additional $2.36 billion battery materials plant in Michigan is temporarily on hold. The hesitation goes both ways. The Chinese government wants to keep the lid on its technology with stronger export controls on various parts of the lithium-ion supply chain.
China's battery making technology, as well as their EV technology, is world-class. And they're afraid that the U.S. or Europe is going to be able to sort of use that technology for their own purposes, making China less competitive.
Needless to say, this is all very challenging for EV and battery makers seeking new shores. But they may not have much choice.
I always like to think about the U.S. economy and the Chinese economy as sort of like this. One is like the photo negative of the other. Like the U.S. economy is driven by consumption, and China's economy is driven by investment in production and R&D. They have all this capacity to make all this stuff, EVs, batteries, and they need to sell it in the rest of the world to keep everybody in China employed. Expanding overseas is really important for any of these Chinese companies because they need new markets to keep growing.
I would say that there's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty making companies a little bit hesitant. However, conservatively, our marketing research tells us that there will be over 500 gigawatt hours of demand for batteries just in the North America region alone. And Goshen definitely wants to be a part of that.
It's not just the US. Demand for batteries is growing globally, which means demand for raw materials. But what if you didn't have to mine all over the world to make your batteries?
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
And I'm Jason Kelly.
And we're back with another season of The Deal.
With athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones. Some good-looking trophy.
1 and 1 is 3 in sports, not 2. And it's because that 3 is imagination. That 3 is putting yourself in a way, having yourself hit the home run.
Erica Ayers-Badon.
I'm a high-energy board member. I'm very passionate. I have a lot of opinions.
Robin Arzón.
I want to light fires in people's lives, and that is still one of my core mandates for all of my businesses.
Justin Tuck.
I tell all of my friends that play in leagues now, make these relationships now while you're hot. Don't wait till you're like your 12th year in and you're just hanging on.
Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news, and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
At a time when policy in Washington is driving Wall Street, we draw a distinction between the rhetoric and the action, bringing you market-moving guests and original reporting. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bringing you up to them in the news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherrian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
We have everything from a small hybrid battery to a large EV battery. Over there you have a shiny battery, easy to dismantle. Other models here are more corroded and more challenging to take apart.
We're doing the coolest thing there is. We are turning waste into important critical raw materials for new batteries.
In Norway, 1 in 3 passenger cars on the road is electric, making it a prime environment for recycling. That's where Hydrovolt comes in. Since the types of batteries can vary, Hydrovolt has to design a recycling process for each kind. Today, they're up to about 200 different batteries. The process begins with D&D. No, not that one. Discharge and dismantle.
Over on this side, we have 6 discharging stations. That's sort of the most critical step, getting the energy out of the battery. And then we move to the dismantling part. We take off electronics, we take off cables, we take off plastic materials. We're in the control room, the heart of this plant. These are battery modules falling into the crusher, ready to be crushed and shredded into pieces. First, a coarse crushing, and then a finer crushing afterwards.
This mechanical shredding process, along with several drying and sorting steps, results in a material mix called black mass.
This is a really fine black powder, which contains the heavy metals like the lithium, manganese, cobalt, nickel oxides. So here we are conducting a measurements, and the main components that we're looking for is the nickel and cobalt, which is most valuable, so that our customers will know how much is in the black mass when they refine it.
That black mass is sold to chemical companies, mostly in South Korea and Europe, which refine it back into battery-grade material, keeping those same metals in motion from old batteries into new ones in a new circular economy. Another benefit is that it bypasses the troubling human rights record and environmental damage that plague the global mining industry.
And the challenge now is to make the business profitable.
Norway requires producers and importers to pay to have their batteries recycled, but the economics are still tough. Black mass is priced at a discount based on the cost of metal components, which can be volatile. Plus, Europe's battery supply chain, which would form an important customer base for Hydrovolt, has been slow to develop. In fact, Hydrovolt was initially launched to supply Northvolt, a Swedish startup battery maker that was hailed as a viable counter to Asia. Unfortunately, Northvolt went bankrupt after it expanded too fast and delivered too many faulty cells. But as more EVs age and come off the road in Norway, Hydrovolt hopes the increased supply of EV batteries will help the company scale up operations.
We know we're at the very beginning of a very exciting journey. We see all the electric cars outside on the roads, and in 10, 15 years they will be here.
It's hard to believe how much has changed since this unassuming battery was first introduced and unlocked a future we couldn't imagine at the time.
Batteries have changed the world once, and they can change the world again because the applications for batteries are many and growing, and the need for those applications to work is getting deeper because we have to meet climate goals, because we have to cut the cost of energy, and because we like cool devices.
The future is zero-emission vehicles. It's just a matter when.
That EV revolution has hit a fork in the road, and the pace of adoption is going to be uneven. The US government is betting big on oil rather than ions to move people and goods. And the EU has rolled back their 2035 ban on combustion engine vehicles. But long-term, any car company that wants to be globally competitive needs to make affordable EVs, and batteries are the key to unlocking that goal.
World's most powerful investors don't ring a bell. They quietly reshape entire industries. This is the money shaping the world, the dealmaker playbook where power and billions of dollars change hands every day. From private equity and credit to venture capital and M&A, we bring you the inside scoop on the biggest deals and debates, plus exclusive conversations with finance's ultimate insiders.
Great scoop on this. You've been reporting about an activist investor coming up and trying to shake things up. What's the latest?
We've been hearing that there was going to be an activist at some point. The question was who?
There is a convergence of technology and national security.
The United States is a big country. We're playing in the Northeast. That's an economy as big as the United Kingdom.
This is a really interesting space to watch. We're expecting more consolidation.
As this is Bloomberg Deals at Bloomberg Invest, I want to talk about the broader deal and M&A environment.
This is a moment in time. We'll see how long we're here. It's far too early to call.
There is an underinvestment in what's going on in private markets because everyone's looking for additional AI cloud capacity, and it's very tough to build.
Everybody wants to get things going, and the IPO market is just one symptom of that. It is an early indicator of what we're going to see in the M&A market.
Let's go to Scarlet Fu, who's taking a closer look at drone companies. With ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, there's renewed investor appetite for new names in the space. Excellent reporting.
I'm Danny Berger, and this is Bloomberg Deals. Every week, only on Bloomberg Television.
The phone is, what's great about it is it's a well-developed gaming ecosystem, right? So it, folks know to find games there, but it's also a highly competitive gaming ecosystem. So it's developed, this gives you both that upside and that downside. But what's exciting is that now we are moving beyond the phone to the TV. So I mentioned like one of the big gaming areas we're going after. One of the big gaming areas we're going after now is social gaming experiences that will show up on your TV. So we are now announcing, we're going to announce here actually, that we're going to have these social party games that you can play on your TV with your phone as the controller. And it's things like, recognizable games like Boggle, you got Pictionary, we've got a Lego party game. We basically are going to like unleash this with a bunch of creators, and they're going to go figure out stuff that we didn't even imagine that they can do with that interactivity.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in the Lesotho Highlands, and this is Bloomberg.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers jobs day like Bloomberg.
I don't think negotiations are about trust. That word is thrown around a lot. I don't trust Iran, but I do think you have to have some respect that your adversary has interests. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation, so they have to get something out of it.
Wendy Sherman, diplomat and negotiator, on how to unlock a deal with Iran. How do you think this is going to end?
What will happen to that stockpile of highly enriched uranium? It's not like you can resolve that in a day. It is a complex, tedious operation under very difficult security arrangements.
From Bloomberg Weekend, this is the Michelle Hussein Show. How should we make sense of another dramatic week in the situation between the US and Iran? Blockade, ships being fired on, essentially the use of force alongside a diplomatic track, or at least an attempt at one. That's the backdrop to this episode as we continue to look at the Iran war from different angles. And this time, it's with someone who knows what it's like to negotiate for the United States with Iran. Because she did it. She's been in those rooms. It was for a different American president, but elements of the Iranian lineup she knew are still there. She's Ambassador Wendy Sherman, longtime US diplomat, former Deputy Secretary of State, who worked on the Iran nuclear deal of 2015. That's the one abandoned by Donald Trump in his first term. And by the time she left the State Department in 2023, she'd been President Biden's key person on China. So this conversation goes beyond the Middle East, to China, to Russia, and to Europe. But for obvious reasons, Iran is where we began.
I think that it's quite critical for people to understand Iran's culture, its history, its people, its government, its theology. It's very different than American or Western sensitivities. It is a culture of resistance. When the 1979 Iranian Revolution happened, it was really a reaction to what we and the British had done in 1953 when we knocked off a prime minister because we were afraid that Iran was going to nationalize the oil industry, and we thought that would hurt us, oil being the constant here. And so we put in the Shah of Iran, who was probably good for us, Westerners, but terrible for Iran. He was quite oppressive, quite a dictator, and it led to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And it is remaining a culture of resistance. So every time President Trump tries to bully Iran, Iran has immense pride and dignity. It's not something we all understand because they're a terrible regime that slaughtered protesters in the street, but it is who they are.
I imagine that this kind of sweep of history, which you're describing right now, this must have been what it was like when you sat in those rooms with Iranian negotiators. Did they lecture you along these kinds of themes?
We certainly, at the beginning of the negotiations, had lots of lectures from those who were in Tehran. Over time, however, we just got down to the brutal details of this negotiation. When you're negotiating around nuclear issues or military issues or proxies, the devil is definitely in the details.
Yeah, but the fact that you're mentioning the historical context now, does that mean that You are saying that the Trump administration needs to understand this and doesn't, and they will only get so far if they don't.
Without a doubt. The regime now is more hardline than even the previous supreme leader, who was pretty hardline. And I think there's a great deal, even more control by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps than there was before. And that means that the concessions the president thinks will come easily will not come easily. They will resist. They will never, I believe, give up what they believe is their right to enrich. They may voluntarily suspend it, but they won't give up the right. I don't think they'll give up their relationship to their proxies. They may reduce the level of their support. I don't think they'll give up their missile program, though they may be willing to constrain it in some ways. So I don't think that when President Trump wants them to really just capitulate, that's never going to happen.
But precisely because it is such a hardline regime, harder line, you're saying, than the one you dealt with, isn't there therefore a role for this kind of maximum pressure strategy, the keeping Iran on its toes, the constant changing of position, the overwhelming use of military force? For example, the Navy has been destroyed. Does that give the United States a point of leverage?
I think that there always, in these kind of negotiations, needs to be a credible threat of force. And in this case, perhaps even the use of some of the mechanisms the president has used. But I think he believes not only in a madman theory, which is act crazy and people will not know what you're going to do, but I think he doesn't have a strategy. I think he's very tactical, very transactional, as he was as a builder, as a developer. And in this case, I don't think that transactional approach will actually work in the end. It may get him some leverage, but I don't see an overall strategy, and I don't think it's been clear what he really will consider success. Sarah Longwell, who's the publisher of The Bulwark, certainly not a progressive magazine, she's a neoconservative, has said that the president is committing superpower suicide. And I think that's a good description, because what he has done has cost our alliances, has cost our American taxpayers, and of course 13 American lives, and an enormous cost to our military, to our inventory of weapons, to our ability to project our power abroad.
And I imagine you would never have had a positive view of Donald Trump and his foreign policy, right? You worked in the Biden administration, you worked for the Obama administration before that. So his worldview would never have been yours.
I'm not sure what his worldview is. My greatest concern, Michelle, is not any specific thing he does. It's, does he have a plan? Does he have a strategy? Or does he just go by impulse every day about what he thinks he needs to do next? And sometimes that's useful to trust your gut and your instincts, but not every day in every way. So no, I'm not a supporter of the president's, but I am a supporter of the United States of America, and I am a supporter of American foreign policy and American power. But I think our projection of power should be to get to a good result, and you need strategy before you take action. You have to have some respect that your adversary has interests. You may not agree with their interests. You may think they're horrible, and I think the regime is awful, but they do have interests.
Tensions are high.
Both sides willing to go back to the battlefield.
The narrative changes moment to moment.
Is there a ceasefire? Is there not a ceasefire? Markets are up, markets are down.
Count on Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute reporting.
Breaking news this morning.
Breaking news in the last few minutes.
On-the-ground perspective.
Talking to you from the bomb shelter.
This White House still pushing.
And the analysis you need to make informed decisions fast.
Clearly nothing is final until it's well and truly final.
The really important question is whether we'll get second-round effects.
Nobody covers geopolitics like Bloomberg. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Before we talk about the Iranian officials you know, some of whom are in even more prominent positions than they were when you were negotiating, what are you hearing about the president himself? Do you think he is well? There's been increasing talk in the last week or so about the extent to which he is posting through the night, about the nature of his decisions. Some people feel that we're moving into a different era in terms of his decision-making.
I can't begin to know what is in President Trump's head. I'm not sure he knows from moment to moment. He's always tweeted at night. He is a night owl. He starts his day late. I don't think that's new, but I do think his impulse behavior has increased. And that is of great concern to me. I'm not sure he understands the stakes here. It's not about just winning this war. It's about what it means for America going forward. He's due to go to China in May to meet with President Xi. I think he's going to go in a weakened position, no matter how things turn out, because even if an agreement is reached, it will be principles, it will be broad outlines, and then people will have to do all of the details, which will take weeks, if not months, if not over a year, to resolve. And so there will be this disequilibrium for a very long time in the Middle East. We have allies in the Middle East who are now saying, send us your dollars or we're going to have to use Chinese yuan to be able to go through the Strait of Hormuz. People have turned to China to build a trade relationship because they don't feel they can rely on the United States anymore. Some of our best allies, Canada, the UK, have said they can't rely on us and have beaten a path to China. This would be of great concern to all of us.
But can I take you back in time? Because one of the things I noticed in your book, which I found really striking in the present context, is the keeping allies out at key moments. I see what you're saying about this is a whole different degree, but elements of this have happened before, haven't they? In your book, you describe the secret back channel that you were part of with Iran and the moment that you had to go to Brussels and tell the Europeans that there was a complete draft agreement between the US and Iran in place, of which they knew nothing.
Indeed. I think everyone understands, and certainly understood then, that if we could not get an agreement, it would be the American military that would have to intervene and try to change the calculus of Iran. And everyone understood that no deal would be made unless it was a deal the United States could agree to. No one likes that we have unequal power. I understand that, but everybody understands it. So my European allies, Cathy Ashton was the high representative at the time. She was not shocked. She was not surprised. My European allies were not happy, but they were not shocked. And Russia and China, who were part of this negotiation, also were not shocked and actually were sort of happy that things were moving along, that President Obama had made a very courageous decision in opening up this channel. So, yes, the U.S. has unequal power. It is undoubtable among the world. But we have to be humble about it. We have to have humility.
But do you accept then that this is a version of what has happened before rather than an entirely new development? I mean, do you actually, to keep a secret like that from people who are on the same side as the United States as far as Iran's concerned?
So, no, I don't think it's the same, because I think this is of such a magnitude. And it's not just about Iran. We brought all of our European allies in. We brought Russia and China in. We went to the United Nations. I spent an enormous amount of time talking to the Gulf Arab states, an enormous amount of time talking to Israel, to Australia, to anybody else who wanted to talk about what we were doing. So we were as transparent as we possibly could be in a timely fashion. America acted with its power, but we did not act alone.
And a key point person on the other side at that time was Abbas Araghchi, who is now Iran's foreign minister, who was there at those Islamabad talks. What should we know about him? What was your experience of him?
He is very smart. He is very tough. His English is quite good. All the negotiations were in English. Before we had the negotiation led by Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, and Araghchi was one of his deputies, we had a negotiation with Saad Jalili, and Araghchi was on his team, but we never knew he spoke English because everything was done in Farsi. So Araghchi's very tough. He can get angry. He is part of the revolution. He was part of it then. He has bona fides. He had a strong relationship with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Even though he's getting some criticism now, I think some of that is drama.
Am I right in thinking that you did develop something of a bond with him, that these were difficult talks, but there was something of a relationship that formed?
Yes. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think negotiations are about trust. That word is thrown around a lot. I don't trust Araghchi. I don't trust Iran. He doesn't trust me. They don't trust me. In fact, at one point, there was death to Wendy Sherman on the streets of Tehran.
That was because of something you had said about Iran, which became essentially a news point there.
Exactly. We got past that. But I do think you have to have some respect that your adversary has interests. You may not agree with their interests. You may think they're horrible, and I think the regime is awful, but they do have interests. And so you have to understand that. And even though it was an unequal negotiation, we were the demandeur, they were the adversary. At the end of the day, it's a negotiation, so they have to get something out of it.
So how do you think this is going to end? Because one way or another, surely it has to. Apart from anything else, the global economy is going to steadily be eroded in the coming months if it isn't.
Eternal life, a concept that has captivated the imagination of humans since the dawn of time. I'm David Rubenstein. The advances that have been made in science recently has made it possible for people to live much longer than they would have otherwise lived decades ago. With innovation exploding, it's harder than ever to know what's real and what's just hype. On longevity, I talk with the leading experts in science and medicine to educate people about how they might be able to change their conduct so that they can live a happier and healthier life.
It is at front and center of what we're trying to resolve and understand.
Americans need to know they are at risk of dying from the next pandemic.
What we really need in our lives is to build community.
Knowledge is power. The generation before us, cancer was considered a sign of weakness, and many never talked about it.
Longevity without health is not valuable, but if you can maintain health, people are productive when they're older.
Join me on a 4-part journey as I explore the great quest for longevity. Only on Bloomberg.
The world's most powerful investors don't ring a bell. They quietly reshape entire industries. This is the money shaping the world. The Dealmaker Playbook, where power and billions of dollars change hands every day. From private equity and credit to venture capital and M&A, we bring you the inside scoop on the biggest deals and debates, plus exclusive conversations with finance's ultimate insiders. I'm Danny Berger, and this is Bloomberg Deals. Every week, only on Bloomberg Television.
So let's talk then about what a deal could look like to resolve this, because you've got the American demands on one side, an end to enrichment, an end to the ballistic missile program. On the Iranian side, they'd like an end to sanctions. I'm simplifying. What do you think the landing zone could be for a deal?
Well, what we've heard, what's been reported, is perhaps a suspension of their enrichment program for X number of years, whether that's 10 or 15 or 20, I don't know. And it would have to be monitored and verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And it would have to be quite an intrusive kind of monitoring and verification. It would mean some controls on their missile program, so they can't get a long-range ballistic missile that could reach the United States. And certainly Europeans would be very concerned about their ability to reach Europe, which would be sooner than being able to reach the United States. It might be some controls on their proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, other militias, the Houthis. It would certainly be opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which, as I said before, was always open until this war. The United States, I think Iran will want us out of the Middle East. And that is a problem. Our second largest naval base is in Bahrain. And we have other assets throughout the Middle East. And of course, Israel is an ally, and we try to protect their security. They will want us not to threaten them anymore, and they would want guarantees and assurances they won't be attacked again. There's lots of pieces of this puzzle on the table, and it's a very, very complex and very detailed negotiation.
Even more than what you did more than 10 years ago?
Much more.
I mean, the more we talk about it, the more elusive it feels. At the same time, I think that there are moments of opportunity that come out of the darkest times. So how do you think this is going to end? Because one way or another, surely it has to. Apart from anything else, the global economy is going to steadily be eroded in the coming months if it isn't.
I quite agree with you. Right now, all I see is a disequilibrium. What I mean by that is some broad outline where folks are going to have to spend quite a long time making sure the details undergird that broad outline. And while all of that happens, my guess is that Iran will still have some measure of control over the strait. What will happen to that stockpile of highly enriched uranium? It's not like you can resolve that in a day. It is a complex, tedious operation under very difficult security arrangements.
Buried underground.
Buried underground, deep underground. We've done things like this before in Kazakhstan, but we did it with Kazakhstan's working with us. And I don't know how anyone will feel secure doing this with Iran. So there's so much to work out here, Michelle. I worry about the administration's ability to do it, since I don't think they've brought the technical expertise to the table. In the last round in Islamabad, I was glad to see that Vice President Vance brought some experts with him, but I'm not sure any of them were in any of the rooms. I'm not sure they were really working on everything that was needed to be done. And none of this is achieved by one person or even three negotiators, the Vice President Witkoff and Kushner. I had a core team of 15. I had the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Energy, who was a nuclear physicist who was brilliant. I had nuclear physicists and sanctions experts and lawyers and Treasury folks on my team. I had people who spoke fluent Persian on my team, Farsi as some people call it. I had literally hundreds in the U.S. government who were engaged in this. All of our national labs, all of our nuclear labs, who could do the exquisite calculations that are necessary to know whether you've got what you think you've got. I don't see any of that infrastructure here to be able to get this job done.
I do want to take you back to your time in the Biden administration and ask whether some of the seeds for what is happening now in the Middle East were laid in that time. You left government in the summer of 2023. That was before October the 7th. But as you watched Secretary Blinken and President Biden deal with Israel through the Gaza war, Did they fail to restrain Israel in a way that has contributed to what we're seeing now?
I think America, Democrats and Republicans, have not dealt with the Middle East in a way that's helped really create stability and peace. And I put that on both parties, including Democrats. Obviously, the Iraq War was a disaster, and that laid the seeds for all kinds of things that we had to deal with. Then, of course, President Obama tried to deal with Iran through the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal. That was undone by Trump. Biden tried, but Iran and the world thought, well, Trump cut it to pieces. And so there was no belief that anything was sustainable. Could the Biden administration have done more? I'm sure we could have. Every administration in hindsight could have done more, could have done differently, could have pressed hard. The politics in our country have been very tied up with our relationship with Israel in many ways. So it's a tough call. And it's something I think we all have to unpack and look back on.
So finally, Ambassador Sherman, how are you handling this period yourself? I mean, are you finding it personally difficult? How do you cope when you see what's happening in the news, like knowing policy as you do and seeing mistakes as you see it? What's the impact on you? You've served the United States all your professional life.
Right. I actually have found myself angrier and angrier because the cost is so great. The cost to American families is profound. The cost to the world is profound. The cost to our alliances, our partnerships, our future, young people from all around the world. They all know that their world is going to be controlled by artificial intelligence and quantum. And these are enormous challenges, and China is a main competitor in that world. And our ability to focus on that challenge is being diminished. And so, yes, every day I am more worried for my child, for my grandsons, about the world they're going to grow up in, and whether the America I love and believe in, whose 250th anniversary is coming up, will still be the America that I treasure.
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, thank you.
Thank you.
Nobu-san, would you say, when you look at your career, that the pivotal moment was actually that meeting with Robert De Niro? It took him 4 years to convince you to open a restaurant near him. You eventually did, and that started a partnership that has lasted through the decade.
You know, I met him 1988 after my first restaurant opened. He asked me to come to open the restaurant in New York. And beginning, I didn't know what he did.
You didn't know he was an actor?
No, I don't know what he doing. Because I never watched the movies, you know, I was traveling the business. But of course, after, you know, people, hey, Nobu, so you must know him. And then I understand.
How is he as a partner?
He's for me, and a great partner. He understands to my concept. He supports me 100%. But he's a very smart people. Sometimes so strange idea, but it's good idea. So, example, Nobu Hotels idea come from him. He said, "Hey Nobu, so we have a lot of new restaurants coming in somebody's hotel." For him, doesn't make any sense. Then we start Nobu Hotel in Las Vegas 11 years ago. Now it's a big success. So next step is the residence.
Middle
East, and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insight from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute space news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Ed Ludlow at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and this is Bloomberg.
Our Players is back to take a look under the hood of the business of Formula One.
Hi, I'm here to see Pierre Gasly.
Welcome to my workplace.
Do you feel pressure?
Massive pressure.
Ferrari is the best example that we can be very proud of the past to look after the future.
From the iconic brand setting the standard,
Oh boy.
can you imagine Ferrari without racing?
No, and I say no, no, no.
To the newcomers forging ahead.
I grew up my whole life racing against the boys.
This global phenomenon continues to chart new territory.
This was a tennis court 8 days ago.
I can't even believe that. And the speed of the business has never moved faster.
My career might stop, but I'll still be driving some.
Yeah. Probably very fast.
Yeah.
This is so exciting!
This season, we're along for the ride.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
Let's talk about the significant risk transfers to find space in their balance sheet.
Hedging some of that risk.
You could look at it the other way. Obviously, this stuff is risk-weighted.
I would much rather be long than be short.
We're in a kind of sweet spot.
Very, very strong alignment.
3 revolutions in one.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Every trading day, only on Bloomberg.
This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston, bringing you stories of capitalism. China has become the #1 auto producer in the world. We go to Paris to see how one of its leaders, BYD, plans to take over Europe. Plus, the IMF and World Bank met in Washington last week to wrestle with a whole new set of problems. How much do they need to change to keep up with the times? And it's not just the people we see on the news all the time. That person next door may be one of the new billionaires, or at least multimillionaires, no one hears about. But we start with the latest AI scare. Anthropic has said that its new Mythos preview is too dangerous for public release. And Secretary Bessent and Chair Powell called in the heads of the major banks to warn them about it.
I applaud Secretary Bessent for doing that. One of the things we always were focused on, the risk to the banking system, the risk for any kind of cyber attack. You're just getting in and change the ones and zeros around in the banking system. So much of it rests on our banking system, so nothing is more important.
We need to do something about it. I don't think there is a framework. You know, everybody is keen to have a framework within which to operate. I don't think there is a governance framework that is there to actually mind those things. We need to work on that.
Catherine Judge is a professor at Columbia Law School, specializing in the Fed. She explained the risks that Mythos could pose for the banking system and what regulators can do to manage them.
The big deal is there are real concerns that this new, much more sophisticated form of AI could detect, and likely will detect, very meaningful vulnerabilities in banks' software in ways that could expose them to cyber attacks that would disable individual banks and potentially the broader banking system.
There is the danger of bad actors getting access to it. Is there a flip side to it also, that it may give the banking system and banks some defensive tools others might lack?
Yeah, I mean, this is always the interesting question, is like AI fighting AI, and what does that look like? And there's also a question of what that looks like for the structure of the banking system. Again, the US has always had a very diffuse banking system. We have lots of small banks, we have regional banks, and they provide different types of services and loans to the real economy. And so one of the interesting questions, if this becomes absolutely vital to be part of the financial system, who's going to have access to that type of technology?
The financial system is global, last time I checked. So it's not just a U.S. problem we have here, potentially.
Not at all. And we've seen both European and Asian regulators speak out and voice significant concerns. And so one of the things that's so interesting about this is you both need clear public-private coordination, but there's also the possibility of global coordination to try to understand just what these threats are and then what can be done realistically to try to contain them.
What exactly can the Federal Reserve do? They have an awful lot of PhD economists. I'm not aware they have a lot of AI engineers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the real challenges, no bank supervisor is prepared for this, right? So cyber attacks are nothing new. It's a challenge banks have been dealing with for a long time. And supervisors have played a role helping to make sure that banks are appropriately prepared as part of operational risk and other concerns. But this is a whole different level. It's jumping up the magnitude of the threat in a way that no bank regulator or supervisor is prepared to fully address. And so the question is, can they ask good questions? Can they help provide guidance? As they did in Washington, can they facilitate coordination and conversation?
You turn to the Fed right now to avoid the problem. But if, heaven forbid, there is a problem, there is a serious hack, what could the Fed's role be in remediation?
This is one of the key issues. I mean, the government's not going to be able to stop a serious cyber attack. On the other hand, the government can play a very meaningful role helping to contain the damage. And really, when you're worried about the functioning of the financial system, a lot of it's on prevention, but things are going to happen and things are going to wrong, and the effort then is on containment. And that's where the Fed having strong relationships with the entire banking system and helping to make sure that it's providing liquidity and potentially helping to provide alternatives for affected consumers and really coming up with a game plan over, well, what can we do and what should we do if things go wrong is going to be, I think, part of the effort going forward to try to make sure that in the really unfortunate event that there is a wide-scale malicious attack, that the damage isn't nearly as crippling as the actor might hope.
Like the rest of us, the Fed may be struggling to understand the benefits and risks of AI. So we turn to the experts, people like Margaret Mitchell, researcher and chief ethics scientist at Hugging Face, an open-source AI platform.
Mythos is really on the cutting edge of cybersecurity right now. It's incorporating a lot of things that we've already known, that's already common in cybersecurity, but it's within a system, also called Mythos, that can operate warp speed. So there's this new sort of paradigm right now within AI called AI agents and agentic computing. Mythos is an autonomous agentic system. It can take sequences of actions without any human oversight, and it can do it, while you're asleep and infiltrate tons of different systems.
If I'm one of the big banks, the Secretary of Treasury Besson called in, and I learned about this. What can I do about the big banks have been spending a lot of money on cybersecurity for quite a while now.
Right. I think that knowledge and that expertise is really important here. You don't necessarily need Mythos to build up appropriate defenses. And actually, this is where the open source world can really help, because it's quite possible, or at least we sort of think it's possible within the world of AI, to have different models swapped in a similar system built with deep security expertise to help with probing for vulnerabilities and creating patches, that kind of thing. And so I think it's really important right now for people to recognize, A, that this technology is possible and that doesn't have to be siloed to any one company, and B, that you can build up defenses right now using tools that are already available for intruder detection, fuzzing frameworks, these kinds of things, where basically it's possible to preempt any sort of attackers and defensively set up safeguards against any malicious problems.
Part of cybersecurity defense is basically having your own organization or other organizations try to hack into you to see where there might be vulnerabilities. So that's been going on for some time at the banks. But is this different in the sense that it can be running in the background constantly?
The punchline is that Mythos is operating in a way where human oversight can be difficult. And that's because it can create action sequences without any sort of human intervention and act on different kinds of things that it sees as possible. And it can do it very fast, and it can spawn what are called sub-agents, so little workers that can do the same thing across distributed systems. This is all this sort of new paradigm of agentic computing. So, it's really within this calibration of autonomy that I think we have to think critically about what we want these systems to be doing, where we want to bring in human oversight, how people should be able to interact with these systems in order to approve or deny things. Because otherwise, with full autonomy, they can just keep going overnight while you're sleeping, spanning tons of different systems, that sort of thing. So, you have to put in place those guardrails, those checks in order to make sure that humans are in the loop and can see into the loop, can really understand what's happening.
So you, of course, are an expert in this. Give us your best judgment when you talk about fully autonomous versus semi-autonomous. Which is better if the goal is safety?
Semi-autonomous. I've actually written papers on this and op-eds, and I'm very opinionated about this, actually. So when you have full autonomy, that's super flexible. You can do lots of different things, and so that's pretty cool. Lots of different things you'd never thought of doing. You don't have to pre-program it, right? But from a safety perspective, also within the context of the financial sector, where there's a lot of regulations at play in terms of accountability, in terms of the passage of data, that kind of thing, you want to make sure that you're able to specify specifically the context within which the system can run, and that it can't jump out of those contexts.
If you're a regulator, what do you do in the face of this new technology to try to minimize or prevent systemic risk?
Regulators have one piece to play within the overall accountability chain. And I think that for regulation, that focuses more on trying to help ensure reliability, ensure safety, opening up the possibility of third-party audits, third-party testing. So there's something to be said for companies that share their code, their information, even if they're proprietary, in order to undergo third-party auditing, third-party testing, that kind of thing. Regulators are in a really nice position to try and ensure that people's rights are protected. So what are the rights that should be protected? So this is where security comes in, reliability, safety, privacy, those kinds of things. So I think regulators have a role to play within the overall ecosystem in setting up what kinds of human values should be protected in these systems, and how can you ensure that your system does that? Show us. Run the evaluations, have it undergo third-party evaluations where we can actually see from someone without the financial incentives of one institution how well these systems actually work.
Up next, we look behind the curtain at Chinese automaker BYD to see how it's come so far, so fast, and the challenge it poses for Western rivals.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in London, and these are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
About 80% of projects will find it difficult to secure financing. And this is really all because of the level of readiness or preparation. As you know, for investment to occur, you need well-prepared, technically prepared projects, but they must also demonstrate economic and financial impact. So one of the major challenges is the stock or availability of bankable projects in countries. Almost all countries have got good plans and ideas, but when you look at the readiness of those projects, that's a major obstacle. And that is why the African Development Bank, through the African Water Facility, invests heavily in upstream preparation of projects to enable countries to have a large pool of investable projects. The second element that is an obstacle is the institutional and regulatory environment in most countries, which make it difficult for investment to happen.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars. Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
This is a story about changes that are too big to ignore. For many years, the global car market has been dominated by the same small group, countries like Japan, Germany, and the United States, but no longer. In the span of 5 years, China leapfrogged the largest automakers in the world, going from 6th place to 1st. It now exports more vehicles than the United States and Japan combined. And no company tells that story better than electric car maker BYD. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie reports from Paris.
At an opera house just north of the Champs-Élysées, a lavish debut, even for Paris. The star of the show, not a performer, but a product. This car is the latest creation of BYD, a Shenzhen-based electric vehicle maker that's taking the world by storm. Today, it's China's biggest car company by sales.
I want to be the best valuable brand in the auto industry.
But it wasn't so long ago that other automakers literally laughed them off. This was Tesla's Elon Musk here on Bloomberg back in 2011.
There's competitors now ramping up, and as you're familiar with, BYD, which is also on the West Coast, I think they're ramping up production of their electric vehicles. Warren Buffett owns 10% stake in that. Why do you laugh? BYD is trying to compete. Why do you laugh?
Have you seen their car?
You don't see them at all as a competitor?
No.
Since then, a lot has changed. BYD now has almost 1 million employees. It says it files an average of 52 patents per working day. And in 2025, for the first time, BYD beat Tesla in total car sales, claiming the title of top electric vehicle maker in the world. How would you characterize BYD's growth in recent years?
Yeah, explosive.
Ryan Fisher is the electric vehicle and charging analyst at Bloomberg NEF.
They've, from 2021, gone from like barely on the map, if you know what I mean, if you look at the chart, to having 4 million plus sales and being in the top 10 automakers in the world.
You come from the industry, Ryan. How is BYD viewed within the industry?
Similar to Musk's comment, like, who are these? I think now people are changing it to, oh yeah, we're kind of scared.
For a better idea of just how seriously BYD and the Chinese auto sector broadly are being taken now, just listen to Ford CEO Jim Farley speaking last year.
It's the most humbling thing I've ever seen. Their cost, their quality of their vehicles is far superior to what I see in the West.
We wanted to get a first-hand look at the battle for the future of automaking, so we went to Paris to see the rollout of BYD's new car. There, we spoke with the woman on the front lines of the firm's global expansion. Why Paris?
Yeah, very good question. Paris is the city full of energy and also art.
Stella Lee has led BYD's charge into markets beyond China, including here in France. As the company's number 2, after its founder, Lee also helped engineer its transformation from a battery startup into an auto manufacturing powerhouse.
So, I joined BYD when BYD is a very small company. They started with 20 people, $350,000 investment. So I joined BYD the second year. My first job is for overseas marketing promoting manager. So I went to Hong Kong, set up the first a kind of international office in Hong Kong in 1997, and then came to Europe in 1999 with $30,000 cash and a 140-feet container battery. The message is you need to survive to sell the battery.
And sell the battery she did, securing deals with Motorola and Nokia, back then leaders in the mobile phone space. An IPO followed, then a major investment from Berkshire Hathaway. With each step, the company grew and doubled down on research and development and bringing suppliers under their own roof.
What do you think the biggest structural advantage is that BYD has over its competitors?
Two things. One is technology. Till today, like we have 120,000 R&D engineers. We invent 52 patents per day. The second is BYD have very strong vertical integration capability. What does this mean? It means like we can do innovation much faster. We can do cool stuff much more than any other people. That's the reason you saw BYD in the past 2 years. We have the sporty car called the Yangwan U9. We have 3,000 horsepower. That is the fastest car in the planet.
It's capable of well over 300 miles an hour. This feels like China turning up and just saying, yeah, we'll have all the records. Thank you.
Sadly, BYD didn't let us race their hypercar to the Arc de Triomphe, but we did drive their latest luxury EV, the Denza Z9 GT. Who do you see as your main competitor? Who is the brand that you're really competing with in this premium segment now with the Denza Z9?
On all the cool technology in this car,
Yeah.
I did not see any competition here.
Given the company's origins, it's no surprise that the car maker's key feature might be its battery. The range is long and the charge is fast, far faster than anything else on the market, if done through their planned system of flash chargers. Fisher says it remains to be seen how quickly BYD can roll those chargers out, and whether their new cars will beat the competition in the field. But there's little doubt that their tech is impressive.
When you think about their advantage in batteries that they've managed to produce, it does seem kind of like incredible. They've come out with the golden egg. They've done it incredibly quickly with the best technology at the best price.
What's more, the new car has the profile of a Porsche and the horsepower of a Bugatti, all at the price of a Subaru Outback, but only in China. Here in France, it runs about 115,000 euros or $135,000.
So with this one, it can be true. It's 0 to 100 kilometers, 2.7 seconds.
2.7. Not all of BYD's vehicles target the luxury space. The lowest cost model in the UK, where Chinese cars now account for 1 in every 10 new vehicles sold, goes for under £19,000 or about $25,000. Cheap, but not the cheapest. Nor is that the goal, according to BYD's special advisor, Alfredo Altavia.
What do you say to regulators and consumers? How do you convince them that BYD isn't just a low-cost disruptor?
BYD has never been and will never be a low-cost player in any segment. Our main selling argument is value for money.
Altavia came to BYD after a career as an executive with the competition. As the former head of Fiat Chrysler's European operations, he was a close aide to former CEO Sergio Marchionne and was considered a top contender to take over his role.
What are the real ambitions of BYD in Europe? Is it volume, or is it positioning in the premium segment, or something else?
I won't answer with our volume target because you will not believe me. But certainly we want to be one of the key players in this industry on a global scale.
If you were an auto executive at a European legacy car maker right now, as you were once, how worried would you be?
Quite worried.
About 1 million units sold last year overseas or international sales. 1.5 million is the number that I've seen for 2026.
Yes.
Are you on track to meet that, to beat that?
Yeah, easily.
Easily beating 1.5 million this year?
Easily, yeah.
In recent weeks, the war in Iran and the soaring fuel prices that have come along with it have added new momentum to electric vehicle demand. China's exports of EVs and hybrids soared to a record high in March, with BYD leading the way. But for all the optimism about international growth, the company has faced major challenges in its largest market, back home in China.
I want to talk about the here and now in the Chinese market. How would you characterize the current state of the Chinese auto market?
Chinese auto market is super competitive.
BYD recently posting a roughly 20% drop in year-on-year profit, the first time since 2021. Is that as bad as it gets, do you think?
No, it's nothing. Because first, because you need to understand the scenario behind. We have price war and competing with an EV car. Because everything we do, the next day our competition will copy. But then for BYD now, we bring another protection river, is our flash charging technology, the second generation blade cell. So this we call the protection river. I think will keep our competition several years behind us.
Are you seeing signs of recovery in the Chinese market?
Yes, and the second, the market in China in Q4, Q1 is not good because all the subsidy, even we have a small portion left, is 100% gone.
Recent moves to wind down government support are a headwind for China's EV makers. But Fisher says subsidies haven't been the only driver of their rise, especially in BYD's case.
How much of BYD's success is down to Chinese government support over the years?
There was the investigation from the European Union about which specific automakers were getting the most subsidies and therefore what tariffs they should achieve. BYD was actually on the lower end of the spectrum than some of those. I think what the Chinese government have done, and what some people look as maybe I would be jealous of it, is that they aligned everything they were doing. They had an automotive plan, they got involved with the metals and mining, they provided the subsidies. Some of this was about oil independence, and some of this was about winning the automotive industry, right? This is a massive part of GDP in many countries, and they've done that successfully. So I don't look at the Chinese and feel like they've done anything massively wrong. I actually feel like we've been a bit naive as policymakers in Europe and places like that.
Some critics may look at BYD's success and the success of other Chinese automakers in Europe and in other markets outside of China and say this is a classic example of China shifting excess capacity to other markets. Would that be a fair criticism?
I think it's a fair criticism. We see it across industries. China obviously has leverage, and you've seen that in the negotiations where they've tariffed different countries. Maybe the French keep them out of their subsidies, and then they get hit with tariffs back on brandy or something like that. Fundamentally, consumers want the cheapest products and the best ones, and the Chinese have managed to achieve that.
So far, American consumers haven't gotten their hands on China's latest EVs. Biden-era tariffs of over 100% have kept BYD and others out of the US car market. But Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping are set to meet in May, and those trade barriers are likely high on the agenda. US car makers might not have long before Chinese cars show up on American shores, something that Ford's Jim Farley was well aware of when he spoke to Wall Street Week.
I've never seen a competition like this. The government bet on EVs before anyone else in the world. They're the largest market in the world, and now they're the most important market in the world. We can compete and win against them, but we have to bring our A game, and we have to learn a lot of new things.
In 2027, Ford is set to debut a line of EVs starting at around $30,000, which Farley describes as a response to BYD. But he's also talked to the Trump administration about forming joint ventures with Chinese firms to build cars locally. Volkswagen and Stellantis have already made similar deals. And as each car maker and country decides how to respond to China's rise, they must grapple with the costs and benefits of protectionism or an alternative. If you can't beat them, join them.
Coming up, the IMF was created before World War II was even over in order to provide stability for the global economy. Can it still get the job done in a very different world 80 years later?
cidade estava sitiada.
Nisso eu começo, eu tremia, não sabia o que fazer.
Foi a mais terrível que eu passei na minha vida.
Eu temo, né, que o Brasil se torne, num futuro próximo, um narco-estado.
Porque no final, tudo é dinheiro.
People back home there, they are suffering. And someone is driving a Range Rover with their money. Where is my money?
I think she's a scam up to now.
It's some of the world's most desperate people who are getting ripped off.
Repeat after me. I am a winner.
I didn't know how big it was. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into.
If you tell me you have a vision of being a billion-dollar business, then you're going to have to do what it takes. And if you're not going to do that, everybody's going to suffer.
Una batalla a muerte.
Money can do a lot of good. It can really transform people's lives, but it can also hurt them.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets? We are seeing modest gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. The stories informing finance with Bloomberg Markets. And rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. A different topic every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
This is a story about being fit for purpose. As the IMF met in Washington last week, its mission of providing global financial stability has never been more important. But one of the fund's key participants expressed doubts about whether it's up to it, whether it is still fit for its very important purpose.
I think we need to step back and look at the IMF and World Bank, their core missions. We cannot have these kind of elite beliefs that get in the way.
An awesome force of 1,000 planes and gliders thrusts deep into France.
That core mission for the IMF and the World Bank was crafted back in 1944 in the White Mountains of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, less than a month after Allied troops helped turn the tide in World War II by storming the beaches of Normandy. 80 years later, the world is a very different place, and the wars that multilateral organizations like the IMF are contending with are now in places like Iran and Ukraine.
Even if the war ends tomorrow, it would take quite some time for the recovery to kick in.
War is, in any circumstances, the worst outcome.
There are reasons to really worry about the upside inflation risks from the war in Iran.
The IMF and the World Bank, I mean, these were institutions that were created even before the end of the Second World War with the basic idea that if countries can work together and cooperate on the economic and the financial front, and we can have stability in the world, then we would have less wars. Clearly, that is being tested at this current moment.
Until she joined the Harvard economics faculty last year, Geeta Gopinath helped countries work together as the first deputy managing director of the IMF.
So in this current environment that we have right now with the conflict in Iran, the countries that have programs with the IMF, many of them are importers of energy, and they're getting hit by these increase in prices.
Many countries are in trouble right now because of the price spikes from the war.
Kevin Gallagher is the director of the Global Development Policy Center at Boston University. We don't know where this war is going, how long it will last. COVID, as I recall, really hit global growth fairly substantially. Is there any prospect this could reach that sort of level?
Well, the global economy has been really fragile, especially in emerging market and developing countries since COVID. And this shock is yet another one. We've had that. We had interest rate hikes just a couple of years ago. Many countries have had sort of climate shocks and droughts, and then, of course, COVID itself. And so we're nowhere near the growth potential that many countries were on a path before COVID happened. And now this shock is really sending a lot of countries back.
Since the start of the new millennium, we have lived through a global financial crisis, the recession that followed, a pandemic, and several wars. But through it all, the IMF has stayed pretty much the same.
The IMF hasn't changed much. It's in a bit of a crisis right now. It still offers a family of emergency financing to countries that are in trouble.
This is the time when the IMF is absolutely critical, given all the instability. First thing I would note is what the IMF is really good at is surveillance, and that is super valuable in this environment of very high uncertainty. Just coming out in terms of forecast of what the impact is going to be of the various shocks on the global economy.
But this comes against a broader backdrop of perhaps increasing dispersion in the approaches of a lot of the member countries for the IMF in their approach to economics. Certainly different from what happened after World War II when the IMF was created. What challenges does that present to the IMF?
The geopolitics, of course, matters for the functioning of all of these multilateral institutions. I think the IMF is somewhat better placed because it plays the role of a firefighter. And when you're a firefighter, you don't really have the luxury to fuss around. It's not about whether you can have another more trade agreement or you can give money to a country to build a road that will be available in 10 years. But it's about, are you going to bail out a country that is otherwise going to plunge into a crisis, which is not only going to affect the country, but is also going to spill over into the region.
A firefighter, like the IMF, may not be directly driven by politics or differences in economic approaches. But those politics and differences can sometimes create more fires to fight as they affect countries' fiscal positions.
We've certainly moved away from the time of ever closer integration and an efficiency-driven global trade model to one where national security concerns are becoming important, and I'm not denying that that's not an important one. That certainly is much more salient in this current world we live in. De-risking supply chains are an important factor, making sure that you have strategic inputs in your own country, factories for those in your own countries, those are coming up too. What the IMF cares about is countries' fiscal situations, and if you're going to end up in a world where everybody is going to spend a whole lot more on defense spending, a whole lot more on building semiconductor chip factories, more rare earth discoveries, and all of that, then we could end up with this big build-up in debt in the world, which already is, frankly, on an unsustainable path.
It's not just the economic approaches that have changed since Bretton Woods. It's also the relative sizes of some of the economies involved, most notably China, which dramatically rose to become the second strongest economy in the world, something not reflected in the allocation of quotas that effectively determine who has influence over the fund.
The quota has gone up, but not commensurate to the formula that the United States made, which says that it should go up relative to the size of your economy. So given that China is now the second largest economy in the world, they should have the second most voting. But the U.S., in the last iteration of increasing quotas, they said, let's increase quotas, but not without voting power changes, because Japan is number 2, and both Japan and the United States don't want China to leapfrog over. It's caused a little bit of a legitimacy issue.
Whether it's the U.S. or China or the other major players in the IMF like Japan, Germany, and France, the wealthy countries are the ones that control a fund whose entire purpose is to help poorer countries when they run out of money. But sometimes that has led to conditions on loans that some find unduly onerous.
The fund was supposed to be there to help countries get a shot in the arm to get back on their feet, but over time, it's had almost the same policy, which is austerity. Now, it's important to have it in countries that are profligate, like I said, but so many of the crises that have been happening over the past decade have been external shocks to countries that have good fundamentals.
Is there an inherent, even structural challenge for the IMF in the difference between who needs the emergency funding and who decides on the emergency funding, because the quotas are determined by how prominent the economy is, how successful it is, how many reserves they have, and the people who need it are the opposite of that. So you have sort of the haves deciding for the have-nots.
Yeah, you put the nail right on the head there. The countries that receive the programs have no say in what the design looks like. They can request, and they often get what they need, but they have no say in the terms.
But Gopinath says from her experience that often structural conditions are required by the situation.
The IMF has evolved as an institution in terms of the policies it recommends and what countries need to do in a crisis, just as the thinking in terms of the intellectual thought too, in terms of what helps a country in a crisis. So there was a time, and I would say the East Asian crisis was certainly one of those, where there was an excessive focus on just spending cuts, and it was about cutting spending across the board without much attention to the details about where the spending cuts would happen. I think that was a strategy that was appropriately rethought, and now the IMF is more targeted in how it spends. In fact, when it goes in and tells countries to reduce overall spending, it very often says that you need to increase spending to the most vulnerable in society because you are in a crisis and this is a particularly challenging time for them. So far more targeted in terms of what's needed in terms of spending reductions. I mean, unfortunately, spending reductions are always a part of the solution because that's the only way for the country to come back to a more stable macro environment without racking up a large amount of debt. These policies are never easy, they're difficult, but I think the IMF has evolved over time in terms of making it better tailored to country circumstances.
The world has changed fundamentally since 1944 when the IMF was created. And it appears that one of the largest changes is about to come, with artificial intelligence poised to change just about every economy. One of the things that we talk about all the time now is artificial intelligence and how it's going to transform our world. Typically, we don't know exactly how, but we think it's going to. When you look at specifically what the IMF does and how it may affect different nations differently, how can the IMF sort of anticipate that if it needs to?
AI is hugely transformative and everybody has to pay attention to it, including the IMF. So even though the IMF has a relatively shorter horizon in terms of the kinds of problems it deals with, AI is something that they cannot not pay attention to. So they are, in the near term, just looking at where most of the AI development is happening and AI adoption is happening. It is happening in the more advanced world, and I would say China among the emerging markets. But everywhere else, it's not as, the momentum is not as strong. So at least in the near term, we could see a divergence where you would have more productivity growth coming out of the US relative to, say, developing countries. But hopefully over time, when developing countries figure out how to deploy AI to close their skill gap, to make sure, when you have scarcity of doctors and teachers and technicians, that you can close the skill gap through AI.
Whether it's AI or an emerging China or a breakdown in macroeconomic consensus, Gallagher says it's hard for an IMF fit for its purpose in 1944 to remain so today. And that has led some to call for fundamental reform.
It needs to get bigger, it needs to get better, and it needs to get more inclusive. It's not big enough. The monetary firepower that it has is only about $400 billion for the poorest countries. And if they all went to the fund like they did during the global financial crisis, we'd be really drained. So one, it just needs to get bigger. Two, it needs to get better. It needs to tailor its programs to country circumstances. If it's an external shock, it should just give short-term liquidity without austerity conditions. And it needs to be more inclusive. The countries that are the biggest recipients need more say in the program design. Those are the three things: make it bigger, make it better, make it more inclusive.
Up next, the billionaire next door. They may not be as famous as Elon Musk, but there are more of them around than you might suspect.
know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up to the minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it's happening. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern in Caracas, Venezuela, and this is Bloomberg.
Peru is maybe first country inspired to me to how can I use the different ingredients. First time we went to Peru, trying to culture food. I never had these ingredients, never used in Japan. Kind of like a wow, you know, and cilantros, chili, garlic, and olive oils. It's a lot of good seafoods, complete a different way. Example, they have the fresh fish, but Japan, the fresh fish uses sashimi, but Peru use fresh fish, make the called ceviche, cooked with the lemon juice. You never use the soy sauce. First time I eat this, kind of the, wow. So then after this one, my open eye more, my cooking style that change, combine to Japanese style and another country food, then make noble style.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
Watch Bloomberg 10.
This is the Asia trade.
This is Wall Street Week.
Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television.
This is a story about your next-door neighbor. They may not look ultra-wealthy, like a Jeff Bezos or a Kim Kardashian, but sometimes behind that unassuming front door lives someone who's found the secret to attaining great wealth. Princeton economist Owen Zidar calls them everywhere millionaires. Our colleague Scarlett Fu had the opportunity to sit down with both an everywhere billionaire and a couple that aspires to be.
You are one of the wealthiest people in America, but you keep a fairly low profile. I know that you are a known entity in Houston, but outside of Houston, there may not be a lot of people who know who Rich Kinder is.
And that's just fine.
Is that by design?
That's just fine, yeah. I wouldn't say it's by design, but yes, I guess it is in retrospect.
Rich Kinder didn't make his billions climbing the corporate ladder. Instead, Kinder created the bulk of his wealth by buying boring yet essential assets and then scaling them into what is now one of the largest pipeline companies in North America, Kinder Morgan.
I like unglamorous businesses, so it never bothered me in the least to be in an unglamorous business.
Kinder is part of a cohort of high net worth yet unassuming individuals that economists call the everywhere millionaires, or in his case, billionaires.
Wealthy people don't answer surveys, and some of them are covered by the media, but that's only a small slice of what's truly there. There's basically a hidden world of everywhere millionaires.
Owen Zidar is an economics professor at Princeton University who served on the Council of Economic Advisors during the Obama administration. He now focuses his research on tax policy as it pertains to high net worth individuals. His research will be published in a book titled The Everywhere Millionaire later this year.
An everywhere millionaire is a private business owner who is wildly successful, but usually operates under the radar based on the place or the industry that he or she is operating in. So you should think of a local auto dealer who has a big vacation home and like a really nice boat. And there are a ton of them, and they're in basically every neighborhood in America. So the way we measure wealth is the two components. We look at assets and people's debts. And so there are 5 main types of assets. There's pension wealth, private business wealth, public business wealth, fixed income, and housing. And so we basically add this all up for different projects. Then on the debt side, most debt is housing debt. There's some student loans and car payments, that sort of thing. And what we do is we just take the difference at market values, and that's your net worth.
According to Zidar's research, top earners derive most of their wealth from equity in businesses they founded or invested in.
If you take dentists have more revenue than the total revenue of every professional sports team in America. So the NFL, the NBA, MLB, all of their revenue combined is smaller than the revenue dentists make.
Manufacturing drives almost half of all corporate profits, but it makes up just a small share of the income going to millionaire-owned private businesses. Instead, these owners cluster in sectors like professional services, construction, and finance. What results is a quieter kind of wealth, earned through ownership stakes in privately held firms rather than big publicly traded companies.
Most people think you have to be like Jamie Dimon or Elon Musk, these really famous public company CEOs, to be really rich. But when you look in the data, there are 1,000 private business owners who have at least $10 million in net worth for every public company CEO. You don't have to follow the traditional white-collar path.
Kinder is one of those individuals. After studying law and serving in the JAG Corps, he transitioned to the private sector. He was general counsel of a small energy company that, through a series of mergers, later became Enron. He eventually headed up operations there, which consisted mainly of pipelines. After leaving Enron, Kinder decided to double down on that expertise.
You bought pipeline assets from Enron, and that, at that time, the company treated it as kind of unwanted relics of the old economy. What did you see in the pipelines that perhaps others didn't?
Well, I saw that there was an opportunity to take midstream assets, and if you ran them correctly and really watched the bottom line carefully, had a good mix of debt and equity, that you could build those pipelines in a way that would allow your stock price to grow, and then you could use that stock price to make acquisitions of other companies. And that was really our game plan. Yeah, we started with really a tiny company. We had market cap of the company, the value on the stock exchange, about $150 million, and we had about $150 million of debt. So overall, the enterprise value of what we started with was just a little north of $300 million, and we had 175 employees. We had this idea that we would look for assets, we would run them as efficiently as we could, we would bend over backwards to serve our customers, and we would provide a good return to our shareholders. And that's kind of the mantra that we've followed for almost 30 years now.
And you built it through acquisitions.
Built it through acquisitions and also just some build out ourselves. Today, for example, we spend about between $3 and $3.5 billion a year on building new pipelines. The trick is don't overpay, but do what's fair and right to produce an adequate return for your shareholders.
Sounds like a very predictable business then.
I think it is. It's you know, no business without risk, and the old saying that it's the unexpected that always gets you. Who could have anticipated what we're going through in the Middle East today? Who could have anticipated COVID? But if your business is built on a solid foundation, you can weather whatever storms come along. We are partnering to develop a pediatric cancer center that's going to be a new 22-story building.
Rich Kinder made it into the ranks of the everywhere millionaires and beyond. But what about the rest of us? What are the chances we could join him?
This was the, I think, second or third place that we saw.
That's the plan for folks like Ray and Dana Cherry. The husband and wife team left their corporate jobs a couple of years ago,
popular for general hand washing,
to buy a rather unassuming business in the San Francisco Bay Area, Monsam Portable Sinks.
We assessed hundreds of businesses in this process, and when it came down to which ones we were going to buy, it was a very short list, maybe 4 or 5. And for us, the focus was on the profitability of the company, that it had consistent profitability, that the business itself was near to where we live, and that the product or the service that it was offering was something that was unique and that we felt like we could come into and learn quickly and move to the next level.
This is a business that was founded by a husband and wife team to solve a food and beverage service problem. They were selling funnel cakes to local festivals and fairs, and husband, being an engineer, decided to build a unit like this in their garage to help them pass their health inspection. 28 years later now, that couple's retired, and this business has since solved these types of problems for over 11,000 unique customers. And all of that just really excited us.
I'm wondering what led you to leave these corporate jobs, these safe and steady corporate jobs, and decide to become owner-operators. It's a pretty big leap.
We had really successful, long-standing careers in the corporate world. I was in finance, Dana was in marketing. Entrepreneurship was always a really big goal of ours, and we'd considered different startup ideas over the years. We'd always thought, hey, wouldn't this be really cool if we could do something like this together? And we came across entrepreneurship through acquisition. We thought this was a great time for us to take a shot at ownership, some autonomy, and leveraging our own expertise to building a business on our own.
This felt like a risk-adjusted path into entrepreneurship. The opportunity to purchase a business where there was already product market fit, that was already established and had a path to having us come in and take it to the next level made perfect sense.
We spoke with an economist, Owen Zeider, and he says that a lot of American wealth is built through private and what he calls boring, often overlooked businesses. This idea feel true to your life experience right now?
Absolutely. As we've dug into this, and you start to see which types of businesses are really running things in this country, that just became really clear to us the more time we spent in it.
We're stepping into a world where there's a wave of small businesses and just businesses that are going to need to be transitioned as those owners retire.
Basically, I think you better understand what you're walking away from, and you better understand what you're walking into. And in my case, I understood very well what I was walking into. I knew those assets. Didn't dream it would be as big as it would become. We've had a lot of luck along the way, but that's how I would view walking away from a corporate life.
The Cherries are still in the early innings of building their business. And as they get ready to scale, established owner-operators like Kinder advise that doing your due diligence is the key.
Generally, I've always believed that you shouldn't really invest in anything you don't understand. And if it's a business you understand and can run the numbers on and understand the strategic concept involved, I think you generally do okay. It's when you wade off into something that you don't really understand and you're relying on someone else to tell you, well, yeah, this is something that will really go, just stick with me. That's when you have to be, I think, very, very careful.
What's your advice to someone who wants to build real wealth through their own company, but doing so without the attendant celebrity and white-hot spotlight?
I would say just pay attention to what you're doing and don't get carried away with PR or trying to be something you're not.
How would you advise someone who has a real business idea but is perhaps afraid to walk away from a stable career to go pursue it?
Well, I think it just depends on your tolerance for risk. You know, I don't think you want to jump out of a plane without a parachute. So I think you want to have a good understanding of that business that you're starting. And in my case, that worked out very well because I knew with this small set of assets we had, I knew we could make those work. You know, the first analyst call we had as Kinder Morgan, there were so few people covering us that we just had an open line. So there were 4 analysts on, all of whom I knew from my Enron days. And so one of them asked, he said, Rich, you know, you were COO of this big company, and now you're starting this little company you're starting now. What do you expect to accomplish? And I said, well, you know, I hope in 4 or 5 years this will be $1 billion company. And one of those 4 people I could hear went, ha, ha. I confronted all 4 of those people years later, and they all swear they didn't do it. But I know for sure one of them thought I was absolutely nuts.
That does it for us here at Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. See you next week for more stories of capitalism.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura.
I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Christina Ruffini. We're tracking breaking news today from Wall Street to Washington. Let's start overseas. The sector is really propelling this deal forward.
Yeah, the hope is this will open up new markets and provide some additional liquidity.
Of course, now they're going to have competitors. We got a big week coming up in politics.
Earnings season is underway. We're going to get some key reports.
Everything you need to know before the markets open on Monday.
Introducing Bloomberg This Weekend, bringing a little Bloomberg into your weekend routine.
Guys, buckle up.
Do you think the dollar will remain the only reserve currency in the world, and are you as comfortable with the dollar as it used to be?
The dollar has been, as you say, a reserve currency for about 80 years. Actually, if you wanted to go further back, you could say it's almost after World War I, when the US had lent money to Europe and the UK for ammunition and so on, and then they had to get paid back in dollars, and that's when the strength of the dollar really began. So it's 100 years, 80 years, 100 years of dollar strength, so much so that important commodities, gold, oil, are denominated in dollars. Dollars are part of the payment system. When countries talk to each other, they represent their GDP and various figures in dollars. I think undoing that will take a long, long time. And, 3% in foreign exchange terms is not that much.
Okay, so you think the dollar will stay as the reserve currency of the
Absolutely.
Investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Chevrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
Coming up on Bloomberg this weekend, mixed messages from the White House and Iran.
The Iranians want to talk. They want to talk in person.
America's special envoys fly to Pakistan today, but will there be direct talks between the parties?
Plus, a pivot on Powell. The Justice Department drops its investigation into the Fed chair.
And we shouldn't be holding our nation's economy hostage because of a disagreement with the Department of Justice.
What does it mean for President Trump's pick to replace him?
And the president puts his mark on the nation's capital, from the White House ballroom to the planned arch, to gold's everything else.
What style is that? Is that neoclassical? Is that early Mar-a-Lago? Does it have a name?
I think Mar-a-Lago might be closer.
Okay, all right.
How Trump is changing the face of Washington.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. It is Saturday, April 25th. I'm David Guerra.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're here with Lisa Mateo. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across all our Bloomberg platforms, radio, TV, streaming, Bloomberg.com, and of course, the Bloomberg Business app.
We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. this weekend. It is the weekend of the White House Correspondents Association dinner.
It is Nerd Prom, and we are here for it.
I have a tuxedo. I believe it fits. Tomorrow, tune in tomorrow and find out if, in fact, it has been sized appropriately. But
if David and I are here tomorrow in our formal wear, you know something has gone very wrong overnight. But
or right.
We're ready. We're ready for any occasion. And you know who else is ready for any occasion? Lisa Mateo here with the headlines. What you got, Lisa?
You got it, guys. Let's get to it now. The White House says that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner intend to meet with Iranian officials in Pakistan this weekend to try and end the war. Now, absent from the talks, Vice President J.D. Vance, the lead negotiator for the U.S. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The Vice President, the Secretary of State, will be waiting here in the United States for updates, and the Vice President, I understand, is on standby and will be willing to dispatch to Pakistan if we feel it's a necessary use of his time.
Meanwhile, Iran's top diplomat landed in Pakistan. A spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry said he will meet only with Pakistani officials, with no talks planned with the U.S. Leavitt claims the Iranians had reached out to the U.S. to arrange the fresh round of talks. And this all comes as the U.S. increased pressure on Iran with its naval blockade, while Israel and Lebanon are set to extend a ceasefire for 3 weeks. President Donald Trump ordered the U.S. Navy to shoot any boats putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz after the military intercepted 2 oil supertankers that try to evade restrictions on traffic to and from Iran's ports. Now to the war in Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia carried out one of the largest attacks on Ukraine overnight, killing 4 people and leaving over 30 wounded across the country. Ukraine's general staff said Russia launched nearly 50 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and more than 600 drones. And in other news, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro is dropping her investigation into Fed Chair Jay Powell in relation to building renovation cost overruns by the central bank. In a social media post, Pirro said that the Fed's Inspector General is looking into it and that she will not hesitate to restart a criminal investigation if their report calls for it. The move potentially clears a path to confirmation for Kevin Warsh, President Donald Trump's pick to be the next chair of the central bank. And U.S. Special Forces soldier charged with using classified information to win money on Polymarket, well, he's been released on bond. Federal prosecutors say Master Sergeant Gannon Ken Van Dyke, he used inside information about the mission to capture Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to win more than $400,000 on Polymarket. He's been ordered to appear Tuesday in a U.S. District Court in Manhattan, where he's been indicted on wire fraud and other charges. Christina and David.
This is a wild story.
That is a crazy story. And as we talk about polymarkets all the time, I think there's just going to be more and more of this.
Yeah, and I think press just the fact that, there are these concerns, Capitol Hill, other regulators saying that this needs to be more closely looked at.
100%. But how do you enforce, and do you have the capacity to do that?
Yeah,
Thanks,
fascinating
Lisa.
to watch that unfold. Lisa, thank you very much. Well, as Lisa reported, President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, they are set to get back on a plane to Islamabad, Pakistan, their second trip for talks since the Iran war began nearly 2 months ago. While Iran's foreign minister is also in Islamabad for meetings, it remains to be seen whether Iran will be willing to sit down with the U.S. to continue discussions of a permanent ceasefire.
That's right. Joining us now from Islamabad is Bloomberg's senior reporter Dan Strumpf, Bloomberg's deputy UAE bureau chief Abir Abu Omar in Dubai, and Bloomberg's senior White House reporter Josh Wingrove, who's traveling with the president in Florida. Dan, I want to start with you since you're on the ground there. Part of the problem throughout this conflict has been different messaging from both within these parties and cross-talking between them. We heard the White House press secretary say they are going to have talks. Iran has said they haven't agreed to talks. Will they be talking? What's going on? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the confusion is absolutely palpable here on the ground in Islamabad as well. The Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, is indeed in Islamabad having meetings with Pakistani officials as we speak. Now, what remains to be seen is if the foreign minister will be meeting with the U.S. delegation, which, as you mentioned, is expected to arrive in Islamabad at some point this weekend. The two sides are really far apart on a lot of issues. Of course, the control of the Strait of Hormuz remains the sort of central sticking point that's holding off talks between the two sides. I think what you may end up seeing here in Islamabad is sort of, each side kind of arrives, passes messages to the Pakistanis who are acting as the intermediary in these negotiations, and then they go their separate ways and sort of continue to talk about talking, if you will. But again, much remains to be seen. It's still only Saturday here in Islamabad, so we'll see what happens.
Josh Wingrove, let me go to you next, and I'm curious about who's going and who's not going. So we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, also the National Security Advisor, archivist as well, I should note, remaining here in Washington, D.C. J.D. Vance, the Vice President, not going as well. Here's what the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say about that yesterday.
The Vice President, the Secretary of State, will be waiting here in the United States for updates, and the Vice President, I understand, is on standby and will be willing to dispatch to Pakistan if we feel it's a necessary use of his time.
Josh, you're traveling with the president, and I'm curious what the administration's perspective on these talks is, how much optimism they have that this is going to lead to not only a ceasefire, but I guess before that, just a meeting itself.
Yeah, David, good morning, and thank you. Yeah, I am traveling with him. Unfortunately, I'm not on the Mar-a-Lago guest list, you can imagine, so I apologize. I look like I'm being held in a nondescript location by the Emperor of Marriott. Bear with me here. This is life in West Palm Beach.
You're getting your points, and we're happy for that, Josh.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. The White House, on the one hand, I think, is wanting to signal disinterest in these talks. If they wanted to put a foot down on them, they would have sent Vance. The fact that they're not, I think, is a signal they want to send. I don't know how material it is, though, because Witkoff and Kushner, of course, have a pretty direct, literally direct line to the president, and are pretty empowered to do that. There's been some sort of frustration in American circles that they believe that their delegation is being sent and, empowered to talk and negotiate there. Of course, one of the snags that we've heard from American officials that they think that the Iranians are not able to do that, in part out of security concerns in the undisclosed location of the supreme leader. They don't, so they think they're hitting a logjam on that. And so I think expectations are low. The fact that on the American side of some sort of immediate breakthrough, the fact that talks are happening, I suppose, are a positive. I think it's important just to remember, as we noted there, but just to emphasize it, the standoff on the Strait is sort of a chicken and egg scenario, right? Like what we have here is the Strait was closed suddenly again by Iran because of the blockade. Trump says the blockade is until they get a deal, including opening the Strait. So it's a battle of wills right now, whether that particular piece will open. And there were a lot of great pieces on the terminal in the past few days about the mounting pressures on the energy markets in particular, and how long we can sort of run on reserves until this thing really starts to cascade through the economy.
And Abir, I want to ask you about how this is being perceived in the region, because obviously we talk about the Gulf is not a monolith, and we know that. But the GCC states, recently they've been a little quieter than they were when, they were actively under fire from Iran. I don't know what you've heard, but diplomats I've spoken to in the region don't have a lot of confidence in these talks. They don't have a lot of confidence in Pakistan as a mediator. Do they think the U.S. is approaching this the right way to end this conflict anytime soon?
Yeah, good morning. So look, you're absolutely right, and Josh and Dan sort of alluded to this perfectly. First of all, the Strait of Hormuz remains the sticking point here, but I've been back in Dubai for a week now, and I've been meeting some officials and trying to understand what the perspective is or how it's changed over the past couple of weeks or so, certainly since the ceasefire was announced. And what really stood out to me was we reported earlier, about a week ago, that Gulf officials and some Western officials believe that reaching a deal between the U.S. and Iran would take about 6 months, and that was solidified to me when I arrived in Dubai. Speaking to some officials, they don't think that things are going to go back to direct firings over capital cities in the GCC, but they do think that the Iranians will take this as long as possible and not come to concessions. And I'm just seeing some Arabic media outlets reporting here on my screen. And this is, Dan is obviously there, but this is not verified reporting by Bloomberg. But some media, Arabic media reports suggest that Arakshi in Islamabad is suggesting that the Iranians would rather deal with J.D. Vance, that the Iranians are not going to come to concessions, and that they're sticking to the 10 points that they've laid out initially, essentially no compromise. And that brings into the question the double blockade that we're seeing across the Strait of Hormuz and what contingency plans those GCC countries are considering to sort of avoid that and get their oil shipments across.
Abir, I want to ask you about the state of Iran today, Iranian leadership, and something the president brings up here in the U.S. a lot is that there's a lot of fractions there. It's not a unified voice coming from Iranian leadership right now. There was a great piece in the Times this week about the supreme leader, just about his health, how he's doing, and I'll quote a bit from it. He was gravely wounded. He's mentally sharp and engaged, according to 4 senior Iranian officials familiar with his health. One leg was operated on 3 times. He's awaiting a prosthetic. He had surgery on one hand and is slowly regaining function. His face and lips have been burned severely, making it difficult for him to speak, the official said, adding that eventually he will need plastic surgery. So confirming what we've heard from the administration here in the U.S., that he was injured in one of these attacks. What is the latest that we know about sort of who is in control, who is kind of leading the charge for the Iranians when it comes to these talks and trying to find some solution here?
Yeah, and look, I saw that piece as well, and it sort of, again, brings into light the conversation that we've had earlier. At the start of this, we're about to enter the 60th day of this war, and no sign from the new Khamenei as of yet. And this article sort of explains why that is, and he remains in a hidden location. There were a lot of reports about his health and where he is, but it remains the people that remain in charge that President Trump refers to as the new people that are sort of more rational, the new regime that he refers to, are those ones that are going to Islamabad. At the forefront of those are Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is in Islamabad today. There are reports about him likely going to Oman next, possibly Russia as well. Those are unverified yet. Oman was obviously a key mediator before all of this started. But at the forefront, those people are the people that we keep hearing about. You've got And actually, you've got Karipov, who's also part of the delegation that is in charge of those talks in Islamabad this week, David.
Dan, you heard Abir say that people are thinking this could go on for 6 months. Are you ready to hang out in Pakistan for 6 months? And I also want to ask you, what is at stake for the Pakistanis? They've really put themselves out there. They're very proud of hosting this talks. This is, I don't want to say a first, but in recent memory, this is the first time they've been in this position. If it doesn't work and if it continues not to work, do they lose face on the diplomatic stage?
Well, to your first question, I mean, you know, Islamabad is just absolutely overrun with journalists at the moment, sort of in this, hurry up and wait mode, just waiting to see what happens. So we'll be here as long as we're welcome. You know, that being said, I mean, for Pakistan, you're absolutely right. I mean, so much is at stake here. You know, this government has really positioned itself, gone out of its way to position itself as the go-between between these two warring nations. It's in a really quite unique position right now in the world of having positive relations with all sides of this conflict, essentially. Of course, President Trump and the leadership in Pakistan are quite close. Pakistan has good relations with Iran as well. Pakistan has good relations with China and a large number of the Gulf countries as well, that are all deeply involved in this conflict. So it is in a unique position. It has invited the two sides here once already, and is really sort of putting all its chips on the table and trying to bring everybody together. And Pakistan itself also has a lot to lose if this war continues. I mean, this is a country that is itself economically on the rocks. It's on an IMF program. It has fuel shortages that are being exacerbated by the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So it too has an interest and a stake in ending this war. So it definitely does want things to wind up soon. Now, whether that happens in the coming days, we'll certainly wait and see.
Josh, we don't have a ton of time left, but we talked earlier about the fact that Vance and Rubio are not going. And Abir referenced this a little bit. It's the inadequacy of the players even going to these talks. You know, in diplomacy, little things really matter. And the fact that Iran's foreign minister is there, the U.S. Secretary of State is not, his equivalent is not going to these talks. How does the White House think they're going to get progress if they're not showing up kind of seriously for the debate?
I mean, Trump likes leverage. I'm sure he sees potential leverage and sort of holding back a chess piece that he can then deploy. But at the same time, Witkoff has a remarkably unusual role by comparison to past administrations. So, you know,
That's true. That's a good point.
And to say nothing of Kushner. So, you know, this is not, I suppose, in some ways all that wild. You know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has not played a huge role in these talks that has left the impression that he is somewhat, you know, removed from this. I think that that's an interesting dynamic in the palace intrigue sort of perspective. But as for the president, you know, sources have insisted that he's not bored with this, but he does not appear overly interested. On the flight down last night, he did not talk to us. He was truthing or tweeting about, you know, renovations of fountains and what they're doing to the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. He was talking about crowds at his inauguration the day before that. I mean, he is on so many other different subjects right now. It does not feel like he's, you know, facing a ton of urgency. Meanwhile, he is starting to really feel a pinch, not only of energy prices, but of coal declines right domestically at home. So that is, speaking of leverage, what Iran thinks it has.
Josh Windrow is going to come back here next hour. Josh Windrow covers the White House for us here at Bloomberg News. Abir Abu Omar, our Deputy UAE Bureau Chief, and Dan Strumpf doing yeoman's duty in Islamabad. Maybe
Thanks,
we'll be there
Dan. Nice to have you on the show. We appreciate it.
As well. I want to go back to what you were talking about, which is this kind of matching up diplomat to diplomat. We know that before these talks were announced, there was a lot of disagreement. The Iranians made it known that if Vice President Vance wasn't going to be there, they were going to hold back who they were going to send. As you say, this is something that is practiced in diplomatic circles.
Right.
Matching people like that.
And that's, again, we've talked about the fact that the lack of formality with this administration can be productive, right? Like barreling through some of those red tapes and getting stuff done. But there's a reason all that red tape exists. And it's so that when you get to these meetings, you don't have to worry about all that stuff and you can focus on the substance, because that stuff can be really distracting, especially if Iran feels slighted and they're already, you know, trying to get to the table. So.
Dan Strumpf laying bare how odd the optics of this are. You have the Iranian foreign minister there holding a variety of meetings. We have these two emissaries of the Trump administration likely making their way to Pakistan very soon. Yet these things happening in parallel. No indication yet that they're going to meet.
Do you think Rubio and Vance have like an Iran beeper that they're going to wear around town in case they got to get on the plane?
Yeah. It's a busy weekend here. Maybe they need that. Yeah.
Coming up, the Department of Justice drops its investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Will that clear the way for President Trump's pick to replace him? That's straight ahead on Bloomberg This Weekend, coming to you live from the nation's capital. I'm Christina Rafidi here with David Gura. Stick with us. We have a lot more news ahead.
This is a 16 grams tuna. Then sushi rice is still a little bit warm. So take one, like a very, don't make it too tight. So from now, and very light, like a little ball. Put wasabi in the middle. Then my process 1 to 6. 1. This is putting the between the rice air. Then make the 4 fingers curl. Make sushi shape. Then touch this. 2. Then turn. Now these 2 fingers, top to the bottom, make the sushi shape more beautiful. 3. Then, I'm not, looks like pushing, not pushing. 3, 4, turn, same way, 5, and 6. So this is the 1 to 6.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
Watch Bloomberg Tech.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television. Earnings season is here.
Earnings season begins. Let's get right to it.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
Netflix here crossing the terminal.
Let's go to a retailer, Urban Outfitters.
I'm looking at shares of Paramount Skydance.
Morgan Stanley, another monster quarter.
A lot still to come.
With the smartest insights.
What are some of the sponsors and some of the CEOs talking about here?
I think the biggest risk continues to be that inflation gets imported around the world again.
Continuing coverage on Bloomberg.
As an exchange, what can you do to make it more attractive to be a publicly traded company?
Talk to our customers. We spend a lot of time with our listed companies, listening to their concerns, and then act as an advocacy group for those companies to allow a company to tell their story in the most efficient way possible and reward them for the good disclosures that they are making in the market.
Is there any sort of financial innovation that you could drive to get more companies to list? Tokenization has come up.
Well, we did announce our tokenization initiative earlier this year. We already built the technology, we've already done a variety of proof of concepts. It allows for instantaneous settlement 24/7, but it is going to be a platform that runs in parallel to our more traditional exchanges.
Middle East tensions are high.
Both sides willing to go back to the battlefield.
The narrative changes moment to moment.
Is there a ceasefire? Is there not a ceasefire? Markets are up, markets are down.
Count on Bloomberg for up-to-the-minute reporting.
Breaking news this morning.
Breaking news in the last few minutes.
On-the-ground perspective.
Talking to you from the bomb shelter.
This White House still pushing.
And the analysis you need to make informed decisions fast.
Clearly, nothing is final until it's well and truly final.
The really important question is whether we'll get second-round effects.
Nobody covers geopolitics like Bloomberg. Welcome to the world of decentralized finance. Bloomberg is covering all things crypto, the people, the transactions, and the technology. Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's get you up to date on today's top stories. Residents in a town north of Oklahoma City, they are picking up the pieces after violent tornadoes damaged about 40 homes, but spared lives. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt.
Just heart goes out to these folks, and we'll do whatever we can. The Oklahoma Standard will be in display as neighbors help neighbors, and we come together.
The National Weather Service says the EF4 tornado was on the ground for 9 miles, packing winds of 170 to 175 miles per hour. Well, from tornadoes to fires. In southeast Georgia, more than 120 homes have been destroyed, while thousands more remain threatened by 2 large blazes. Investigators, well, they believe one of the fires was sparked by a foil balloon touching power lines. And in northern Florida, a volunteer firefighter died battling a wildfire. In company news, NVIDIA has extended its lead as the world's most valuable company. Shares rose to their first record in months on Friday, pushing its market cap to more than $5 trillion. Expectations that massive spending on AI computing infrastructure continue to drive the rally. And Google plans to invest up to $40 billion in Anthropic. The Alphabet-owned company is committing to invest $10 billion now in cash at a $350 billion valuation. Dave and Christina, the rest, another $30 billion if they hit certain performance targets. So big money for big tech.
Still a lot of big numbers here.
It doesn't seem to be slowing down.
No.
Not yet, anyway.
No.
Thanks, Lisa. A surprise announcement here in Washington on Friday involving the criminal investigation into outgoing Fed Chair Jerome Powell. The Department of Justice suddenly dropping its inquiry, potentially clearing the way for President Trump's pick to succeed Powell.
With us now is Bloomberg's Enda Curran and Chris Strom. We've been reporting on this ongoing drama, Enda from the Fed side, Chris from the DOJ side. Enda, let me start with you. I'll put up the tweet here from Janine Pirro, the Post, on X, I should say, indicating that she's dropping this, sending it over to the Fed's IG. Help me understand something, because back in July, we had the Fed chair do essentially the same thing. There has been an IG investigation underway already. What's changed as a result of this?
I mean, it's an off-ramp. It was always going to reach a point, this investigation, whereby the president had to make a call. Either carry on with the investigation or drop it in order to get his pick for the Fed chair confirmed, which is, of course, Kevin Warsh. And we're at that crunch point now. Mr. Warsh has had his hearing in the Senate. He clearly has support, with the exception of Tom Tillis, who's holding out because of the investigation. Obviously, the off-ramp here is drop the investigation, you get your candidate confirmed, and you move on with your agenda for the Fed. Now, we're not quite there yet.
Sounds so easy.
It sounds so easy. It's an element of a shocked but no surprise here type thing. But we don't yet know, of course, how Senator Tillis will respond to this. Is it going to be enough for him or not?
Who do you think got through to the president? Because we've been covering this for a while, and even Republicans who are big supporters, as we mentioned, had gently said, like, we would prefer he moved on with this, and he didn't seem to want to. What changed?
Didn't seem to want to at all. There was escalation up to recent weeks, commentary from him, commentary from Ms. Pirro, all making the point that they were going hard against Mr. Powell. I think it comes back to the idea that hold on a second, we have your candidate to run the Fed, the person you want. We've now had the hearing. We clearly have support from him among Republican GOP makers. Chairman Powell's term ends in a couple of weeks in the middle of May. We need to get on with this. And I think the thinking is that idea just kind of permeated through eventually to the president, that now they're at a junction where they have to get it done. There's one other point to consider, by the way. If they had not gone ahead, or if they do not go ahead and confirm Mr. Warsh, it would leave the prospect of Mr. Powell remaining on as a temporary chair.
Right.
And that's probably surely not what the White House would want. So I think a confidence of all of these issues just got them to push it over the line.
I want to get into that more in just a minute here, but let me bring you in the conversation, Chris, and just ask you to react to what Enda just said there, the fact that we'd heard a bit of bombast from the U.S. Attorney for D.C. earlier in the week that she was going to stick with this. What is your sense of what's changed here, the degree to which the White House, perhaps with some aid from, I don't know, the chair of the Banking Committee, from Senator Tillis, made this happen?
Well, everything about this investigation has been abnormal. I mean, Pirro launched this investigation without talking to DOJ leadership.
Is it possible that you are on mute this morning? It's early. It's early. Have we put our Zoom? Oh, our control room can hear you, so hang on. We're going to try to work it out. We'll go back to Enda. I mean, same question, right? It's kind of exactly the same question. But as we go forward, there's also no guarantee for Powell. If he steps away, if this all happens, if Warsh is confirmed, the DOJ couldn't restart this investigation, right?
That's right. Remember, there are several threads in this. So Ms. Pirro's come out and said we're going to drop the DOJ investigation. Wow, that sounds like a big deal on paper. But she also made it clear that she reserves the right to reopen it. And we know that the Inspector General investigation will be very detailed. And of course, the DOJ could seize on something on that on paper and perhaps reopen it. So it doesn't give Mr. Powell much finality, and that's what he's been looking for.
Right.
Chris, once more into the Zoom breach. Let's try again here. Have you responded to what I asked you the first time?
We believe in you.
Which is what changed on the part of Janine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for D.C., over the last few days?
Well, everything about this investigation has been abnormal. Pirro started this investigation without talking to anybody at DOJ. She coordinated with Bill Pulte, the head of the Federal Housing Agency, in order to launch it. And then she was sticking to her guns in the face of all this opposition. And even as early as 4 days ago, she was saying that she was committed to the investigation. And then obviously yesterday, she dropped the investigation. And if you look at even, the language she used, she is not willingly doing this. She was clearly leaned on in order to do it. She said that there has been a referral over to the Fed, IG, in order to do the investigation, but she reserves the right to resume the investigation. And it remains to be seen if that's going to satisfy Republican senators like Tom Tillis when she's out there saying that she might resume the investigation.
And we haven't heard from Senator Tillis. He's going to do an interview tomorrow morning on NBC News. We haven't heard from Jerome Powell either. So let me play a bit of tape here of the Fed chair talking a bit about this investigation from last month. Let's take a listen.
I have no intention of leaving the board until the investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality. And I would refer you to the statement that was in the Fed's brief that you all have seen. Was in the Fed's brief that you will all have seen, and I won't have anything more for you on that. On the question of whether I will then continue to serve as a governor after my term ends and after the investigation is over, I have not made that decision yet, and I will make that decision based on what I think is best for the institution and for the people we serve.
I linger on one phrase there, and that is his desire not to leave until the investigation is well and truly over. So here you have the DOJ effectively ending its investigation for now. I guess we can add that caveat to the end of that. But the investigation does continue at the behest of the U.S. Attorney. This now moves over to the IG's office. Will it be enough to satisfy Jay Powell? Does he feel like that investigation is well and truly over?
Well, it's going to be a big judgment call because we know the IG, Inspector General inquiry, will be very detailed. I mean, recently, for example, they put out a report on overspend on laptops at the Federal Reserve that was detailed with prices, with photographs, you name it. So I'd imagine their investigation into multi-billion-dollar renovation is probably going to turn up issues. And the question then becomes, could any of that be used by the DOJ to resurrect the investigation? That's going to be the big call for Chair Powell. Just to be clear, it's unusual for him, while his term as chair ends in mid-May, he's allowed to stay as a governor.
Till 28.
Until the start of 2028, and that's what's kind of unusual in all of this.
Chris, I mean, similar in that vein, Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Levine wrote that Powell should take the win and leave when his term expires. Is there any leverage, any way to get any kind of an immunity deal out of DOJ? I haven't heard any talk about that. I'm assuming that's not on the cards. But what do you think? Should Powell just go gently into that good night, or should he get some guarantees before he gives away his leverage?
Well, I think for Powell, this is a matter of, fundamental principle. And, he feels like that, he's got the upper hand here. And also, I think it's really telling that the investigation was dismissed when Pirro was saying that she had legitimate reasons to look into the cost overruns. And usually the Justice Department isn't going to back down from a criminal investigation when they feel that they have the goods in order to continue. And so the fact that the department decided to back away from the investigation tells you that there was, some failures on the department's part to have the information that would actually result in a fruitful investigation. And so everybody was looking for an off-ramp. And at this point, it looks like that the Justice Department is providing the off-ramp for Powell, and the question is, will he take it?
Chris, we're lucky to have you with us for your perspective on this office, on the U.S. Attorney's Office for D.C. So I think of the major U.S. attorneys now, I think there are a lot of people who know of Jay Clayton. Obviously, he had a big government profile before he took that job in New York in the Southern District. But I think it's safe to say Jeanine Pirro, formerly Judge Jeanine, is best known to the American people. What do we know of how she's running this office, the role that it's playing in the broader Justice Department ecosystem at a time when there is an acting Attorney General? We'll see what happens to Todd Blanche. The role that she has now, talk a bit about that and the platform that she has as the U.S. Attorney for D.C.
Well, I think that Pirro has emerged as one of the most aggressive and effective surrogates for Trump in terms of carrying out his agenda. If you look at the cases that she's been pursuing, she has been very aggressive in terms of pursuing cases that relate to like immigration crackdowns and violent crime crackdowns, but also going after Trump's perceived political enemies. I mean, she was the one that brought the investigation against the Democratic lawmakers who put out the video talking about how military members, have an obligation to follow their oath, and that investigation failed when she tried to go before a grand jury. So she's had a number of cases that have been clearly driven by the interest of the president, but she has not been able to succeed in finishing those investigations, and she's had some really significant public failures with some of the efforts that she's made to go into the grand jury and get charges.
I've been speaking to some just friends and acquaintances in D.C. who are lower-level prosecutors at DOJ who just talk about the whiplash of not knowing what they're supposed to be working on, if what they work on is then going to get pardoned by the president, who they're supposed to be investigating, and just the shifting sands underneath them. I do want to ask you, though, as we look back on Jay Powell's term at the Fed, what are the big takeaways? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? What did they change? And what is his legacy going to be?
Well, it was a very turbulent time when, if you think about it, he had the pandemic, then he had the great inflation outbreak, and then, of course, he had this political attack by the Trump White House. I think the Fed publicly, Mr. Powell publicly would say that they responded as they needed to during the pandemic, a time of grave economic threat, rolling out all of the support that they did for households and businesses, cutting down interest rates and putting money into the money markets to try and keep things ticking over, so they would stand by that. Of course, the criticism has been that they were very slow to respond to inflation. I remember at the time they were calling it transitory, and of course that left a legacy now of price burn in people's pockets for years since. So the inflation story is there. And then when it comes to the battle against Trump for protecting Fed independence, I think on that one he's come across as being seen as firm and resolute in trying to stand up for the institution against political pressure. So like anyone, it's clearly a mixed legacy. He has some supporters and some fans.
Enda Curran, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming in on this Saturday morning. Enda Curran, who covers the Fed for us here at Bloomberg News, and Chris Trump, who covers the Justice Department. Great to get your perspective on this story that's very much still evolving over the course of this weekend. As I say, Senator Tom Till is scheduled to be on NBC tomorrow, and I think he is the one that we are waiting to hear from Christina.
That's the interview to tune in. We will be monitoring that as well while we're live on air here.
Is Jay Powell satisfied? Yes. Is Senator Till satisfied? That's going to make a host of difference here, looking ahead to that confirmation of Kevin Warsh.
100%.
All right, coming up here, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, on track to add to his fortune this year when SpaceX goes public. Up next, we're going to speak to the authors of a new book that looks at Musk's past, what might happen next. They've coined a new neologism here, Muskism, about the role that Elon Musk is playing in the world and all of our lives. That's coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, Streaming, of course, at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Business app. Stay with us.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Have you ever used a credit card and had it denied? I get to Wells. First thing I want to do is get a Wells Fargo credit card. I was out to dinner with some good friends, and I pull out my card and it got denied.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
When it matters, investors turn to Bloomberg Surveillance.
I said it maybe even on your show here.
I hear you guys talking about this a lot.
Our investors are really thoughtful. They're engaged. They listen to your show.
As a number of people you've had on your show have mentioned.
The three of us have talked about it on this show many times.
I think you find, and you've heard this on your show.
We've already talked this morning on your show. As you know, and you cover every day on Bloomberg.
You've heard a lot of guests talk about that.
I think your show is incredible.
Bloomberg Surveillance, we're talking about it.
About 80% of projects will find it difficult to secure financing. And this is really all because of the level of readiness or preparation. As you know, for investment to occur, you need well-prepared, technically prepared projects, but they must also demonstrate economic and financial impact. So one of the major challenges is the stock or availability of bankable projects in countries. Almost all countries have got good plans and ideas, but when you look at the readiness of those projects, that's a major obstacle. And that is why the African Development Bank, through the African Water Facility, invests heavily in upstream preparation of projects to enable countries to have a large pool of investable projects. The second element that is an obstacle is the institutional and regulatory environment in most countries, which make it difficult for investment to happen.
When news breaks,
a redhead across the Bloomberg terminal.
Bloomberg has you covered.
Trump's global tariffs are struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
For all the context and clarity you need.
There's going to be now tons of tariff headlines until midterm elections.
Hear it first on Bloomberg.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. The stories informing finance with Bloomberg Markets. And rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. A different topic every weekday, now for a full hour only on Bloomberg Television.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Deals.
We're leading this from the top, and we are setting this forth as really our aspiration, our mission as a firm to be leaders, maybe not so much in developing technologies, but in applying them to enterprise-wide change, to how we run our business, to how we make investment decisions.
What do you think are some of the biggest ways that investors might get this wrong?
So like anything, you have to start with your business objective. You can't start with the technology. And so what do I want to change? What do I want to improve? What new model do I want to create? And then kind of work back from there. Second is, of course, the implications that will be there for labor, because so much of the power of it right now is in automating tasks that are quite labor intensive or data and knowledge intensive. And so there has to be a lot of thought through what's the new talent paradigm look like? How do you want to change roles?
Don't miss Bloomberg Deals live every week.
Earnings season is here.
Earnings
Season begins. Let's get right to it.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
Netflix here crossing the terminal.
Let's go to a retailer, Urban Outfitters.
I'm looking at shares of Paramount Skydance.
Morgan Stanley, another monster quarter.
A lot still to come.
With the smartest insights.
What are some of the sponsors and some of the CEOs talking about here?
I think the biggest risk continues to be that inflation gets imported around the world again.
Continuing coverage on Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg this weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's get you up to date on today's top stories. iHeartMedia reportedly holding talks about a possible sale to SiriusXM. Sources say the deal would create an audio giant, joining the largest radio station owner in the U.S. with the largest satellite radio service. At the combined company, it would have more than $12 billion in sales. Bloomberg Radio provides programming to SiriusXM satellite radio. iHeartMedia is a strategic partner of Bloomberg Media. And sources tell Bloomberg the Trump administration is weighing whether to invoke the Defense Production Act to support a potential bailout of Spirit Aviation. The 1950 law gives the U.S. president emergency powers to direct production of goods and services that are critical to national defense, and that includes extending loans and making investments. Now, applying to a statute to a commercial airline, that would likely face some legal and political scrutiny. And the hottest phone for kids right now is a $100 retro-styled landline. You heard that right. The tin can, it lets people make free calls between devices, also to emergency services. It's gone viral over the last 12 months. Hundreds of thousands have been sold. Parents say their kids get excited to use it, and they get excited to keep them away from social media.
I'm a skeptic of this.
You don't have one of these? Our executive producer just said in our ear she has one of these.
There's also a waiting list to get it. And I think like, when I talk to my kids, like they are terrible on the phone, meaning like I think kids today are not conditioned to like pick up the phone and talk. They're used to FaceTime. But like, what are they going to talk about? What are these young kids going to talk about? I didn't have a phone. They'll call 911. That's what the EP is saying. Thank you very much.
Gosh,
Carol,
there you go. Thanks, Lisa.
Really bring it down to the realities that yes, they could call 911. I guess that's important.
If I get one of those, I don't want you on the other line. I want Lisa on the other line.
All right.
Good for you. All right. The world's richest man may soon also be the world's first trillionaire, as Elon Musk's SpaceX targets an initial public offering with a valuation around $1.5 trillion in what would be the largest IPO ever.
Our next guests are the authors of a new book called Muskism, a guide for the perplexed, and that neologism, that term refers to the ideology and worldview that shaped Musk. They say it is an operating system for the 21st century. Ben Tarnoff joins us now, along with Quinn Slobodian. Ben, let me start with you. And just have you define this term. I mentioned it's a new one. What is Muskism, and how important is it to all of us in the way in which we lead our lives today?
So we define Muskism as the promise of sovereignty through technology. And the case we make throughout our book is that Musk is not so much in the business of selling cars, rockets, or satellites, so much as he sells the idea that in an increasingly unstable world, both individuals and nation states can fortify their self-reliance and resilience by plugging into his infrastructures. But of course, in doing so, they become even more dependent on his infrastructures. And you can really see this as a through line throughout his career. Take the example of SpaceX, which gets its start in the early years of the War on Terror as a key government contractor, helping Donald Rumsfeld's Pentagon put satellites into space. Now, 20 years later, Starlink is the main revenue model for SpaceX. And when you look at Starlink's major use cases, it's military, it's also first responders, public safety who need to be operating in remote environments and also in times of conventional grid failure. So we really see this as a through line throughout Musk's career.
Quinn, you guys also compare Musk to Fordism. Henry Ford, assembly line techniques, standardization absolutely changed manufacturing and ushered in this system of mass production that still kind of defines American capitalism and especially defined the 20th century capitalism. When you compare that to Elon Musk, where are they similar? Where are they separate? And is Elon Musk the Henry Ford of the 21st century?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Fordism is a term that was coined about exactly 100 years ago. And people were not just talking about the factory, but they're talking about the world outside the factory, right? So it was a world of mass production plus mass consumption, in which doing things on the assembly line was also about the nuclear family. It was about intergenerational upward mobility. It was about collective bargaining agreements. So there's a kind of social contract inside of Fordism that was very interesting to us. because we wanted to ask, if you look at Musk, what's his social contract, right? We know that he has his group of reply guys who can even monetize their feed. We know he has investors who are very interested in his businesses. But how do you scale that? Is it possible to build something as stable as the 20th century model, in which there was a kind of a virtuous cycle of workers being able to afford the products, when, as Musk is doing, you're kind of promising to make a lot of those workers obsolete? And you seem to have a very selective idea of who gets to be in the social contract and who gets to be out. So the way that Fordism has been described as a kind of philosophy of social peace, we think of one of the strange things about Musk is he seems to be preaching a kind of ideology of social war. He almost seems to be drumming up kind of antagonisms and frictions as a way to better sell those insulating technologies to make you safe inside of your Tesla or SpaceX dome, you know, when the social unrest begins, when climate breakdown begins. So it's a very tenuous kind of social contract we see. And in the last chapter of the book, we talk about Doge and State X as a kind of way to test the theory. Like, can Musk become a real techno king, as he is officially described at Tesla? Or do normal politicians like Trump actually still have an important role to play in the model? How far can Silicon Valley govern directly?
Quinn, let me stay with that, because I think there's been a lot of fascination about Elon Musk's engagement with politics, and you write about state symbiosis in the book. That is, we have Elon Musk presenting himself as a real libertarian, doing things outside the realm of government, and yet we've seen him obviously cozy up to this president. I don't know what the state of the relationship is, what their state of the relationship is today, but drill in on that if you could, the way that he sees his companies, his empire interfacing with government.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything we were trying to do with the book was to really change the conversation specifically around this. So we really think that the notion that Musk, or really anyone in Silicon Valley in the leadership class, is a libertarian is really kind of a misleading, almost a red herring. Certainly someone like Peter Thiel had his moment when he preached that kind of ideology, but Musk actually never did. What's actually fascinating about following Musk's career from the 90s, when he starts a company called Zip2, few people remember, which relies on what? The new government-developed service of GPS. That was military technology, and he taps into that and makes that a commercial-facing product. SpaceX, Tesla, Department of Energy loans, zero-emission vehicle credits. He's always actually been happy and open about using the backstop of the state, thinking about the government as a primary client. And in this era of generative AI becoming really the investment story and the growth story for the tech sector, you can't live without the government, right? You need a friendly state. You need someone who's going to open up federal land for data center construction, who's going to clear the path in regulatory terms for you to get your way. So in fact, we don't see a contradiction when Musk enters government. We see it as a kind of a test of how far the state symbiotic relationship can go without becoming a parasitic one. So Musk works when he works because he actually increases the capacity of states to do things. When it tips over into parasitism, then it becomes a kind of obstructing crony-style capitalism, and it stops working for both partners, as we've seen, indeed, many times in the Musk-Trump relationship.
Ben, we've only got a little over a minute left, but I also want to ask you about the cult of the Musk personality and the whole ethos around him and how that's folded in with the political climate and how that's impacted everything we've just talked about. Can Elon Musk, the businessman, exist without the other half of that? Do they feed each other or do they conflict with each other?
Well, one way to think about this question is Musk's relationship to science fiction. I think a lot of commentators, observers of Musk have noticed that he often cites science fiction as a major influence. We actually see Musk as a science fiction author or narrator of a sort, because from the beginning, from the 1990s, when he makes his first fortune as a dot-com entrepreneur, he's very good at securing investor confidence by telling stories about the future. And these future stories are on the one hand fantastical, but on the other hand have a kernel of plausibility such that investors are willing to help give him the money to go build that future. We actually describe this dynamic as financial fabulism. And over the years, he finds new venues, new forums for this financial fabulism. Social media arguably supercharges it, where he can speak to not just, institutional investors, but he can move markets with memes. He can post about Dogecoin, the cryptocurrency, and the price of Dogecoin goes up. He can post about Tesla and the price of Tesla goes up. So that has become so integral to his business that it's infrastructure, essentially.
Ben Tarnoff, thank you very much. Ben Tarnoff, Quinn Slobodian, the authors of Muskism, a new book on store shelves now.
Thank you both so much. Coming up, dozens of world leaders coming together on the tiny island of Cyprus this week with the safety of Europe and NATO very much on their minds. Oliver Crook joins us next from Cyprus to talk about all that and much more. We'll be right back.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Open Interest.
Christian, how have those conversations gone with those respective governments, with the U.S. and with Mexico? Are you optimistic that they're going to give you some sort of break around tariffs?
It's been a challenge because I think these issues that we have on tariff is intertwined with other issues which are more political, and I think the governments are aware of the situation, and I think affordability is very important for the U.S. government.
Your manufacturing footprint, how important is it to you to be manufacturing here? What are you doing with your plants, for example, in Mexico?
We're very focused on producing where we sell, and obviously with the tariff, it's been an accelerator in the right direction. More production in the U.S. and in our plants in Tennessee and Mississippi, we're maxing out the production. And the objective is really to reach an 80% mix of production in the U.S. for the U.S.
Don't miss Open Interest live every weekday.
In case you missed it, on the close.
I'm 54 years old. I've always been into technology. I always invest in things that I first believe in and, things that are going to change people's lives. And I know once people come inside the store, they will love what they see and they will fall in love with what they see. I was in the store for 4 hours. Wow. And they're just, robots, dog robots, holograms. It's a beautiful place to be, and I think if you're ever in Times Square, you should definitely check it out.
Don't miss the close live every weekday.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Surveillance.
I don't know if any of you can tell me with a straight face that the world is safer, more secure, and more prosperous because of this war. We know that deficits will be larger, inflation will be higher, we'll have less and later monetary easing, interest rates have risen, growth will be slower, supply chain disruptions are certain. I'm not here to tell a doomsday story, but
sounds like one.
Equity valuations surpass the pre-war baseline, I'm out.
What do you think could be a memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States? Not a serious, comprehensive deal, but what could be a base case that can come out of talks?
I've never heard of an MOU settling a war, but there is deal space, and I understand why there's relief in the markets from the lows. It can come together. I think there's political appetite on both sides, but my point is on valuations. How much is that relief worth?
Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance live every weekday.
Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Regime change at the Fed is a matter of when and not if.
This is not a small matter.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis, including Powell's press conference.
A series of shocks have interrupted progress.
We've completely priced out a rate cut for 2026.
This is a really tough time for all of us in markets.
There is nothing this institution can do in the face of the shock, I swear.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance, the Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Christina Ruffini, here, of course, with David Gura. The war in Iran and the impact on global energy supplies and the security of NATO dominated a meeting this week in Cyprus among EU nations.
There were some notable absences at that conference on the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. Bloomberg's chief Europe correspondent Oliver Crook has been there for all of the proceedings. Oliver, let's start there, if we could. We know that President Zelensky was there. We know that the president of Syria made an appearance as well. Who was absent? What does that say about Europe's focus at this point in time?
Yeah. Well, one of the sort of notable absences was Viktor Orban, right? He has been voted out as prime minister of Hungary. That was a couple of weeks ago. And of course, that has sort of shaped very fundamentally the power dynamic at the table of the European Council, where all the leaders were assembled to discuss the various different issues that are facing Europe right now. And once again, the tone and the sort of conversation being set by Donald Trump and the activity in Iran, obviously the energy crisis. But again, the absence of Viktor Orban, and we had a sort of nod to this from the Polish prime minister, Donald Tusk, who said for the very first time in a very long time at the European Council table, Russia was not present, which was a sort of dig at Viktor Orban and his close ties to Vladimir Putin. But when you think about Zelensky, who was there on Thursday night meeting with leaders, he has had a really spectacular reversal of fate over the last couple of weeks. You know, a couple of weeks ago, it was unclear whether or not the Europeans were going to be able to get him that 90 billion euro loan. That is absolutely fundamental. That's really a survival lifeline for the Ukrainians to fund the war effort for the next 2 years. That has shifted. They also got through the 20th sanction package. They're now working on the 21st sanction package. These are European sanctions over on the Russians. And now there's a very active conversation at the European level, now that Viktor Orban is out, about the process of bringing the Ukraine into the European Union, the accession talks. That is something that the Ukrainians would like to see happen as soon as next year. That is intensely optimistic in terms of a timeline. But there were real conversations and real concerns about this being a real conversation and sort of being able to make any progress while Viktor Orban was there. And this is something that is now being discussed at this highest level for the Europeans. We should say it's still a pretty long path for the Ukrainians to join, but it's absolutely symbolically and, of course, economically vital for them in their future.
That's some pretty direct diplomatic shade. Russia not present. That's kind of as shady as you get in those circles. The other thing I've been hearing a lot of sound on, and I know you flagged some sound from the Romanian president about, is there was this Reuters report about an internal Pentagon memo talking about how the president might be looking into trying to suspend Spain and other members who aren't helping with Iran, even going so far as to talking about the Falkland Islands, possibly seeing if they could change sides and you know, say that the British don't get the Falkland Islands anymore. We do want to play you flag this sound from the Romanian president, and then I'll come back to you.
Inside the European Union, we are one of the biggest supporters of the transatlantic relation, because we understand that our security, the Europe's security, depends a lot on NATO and directly on the United States. Of course, so you know all the context. There was for years there was a disbalance between the expenses for the security between the United States and Europe.
So, Oliver, that's from your interview. Why did you want to talk to him, and why does Romania stand out as we talk about how Europe is responding to the conflicts in the Middle East right now?
Yeah, so I mean, Romania is one of the only EU nations that actually allowed the United States to use their bases for refueling and other sort of operational tasks in their bombing campaign and their war in Iran, which was something that really sort of is an outlier within Europe. You know, again, the Europeans keep being put in these sort of impossible positions by the president of the United States, where on the one hand, basically their survival from a security standpoint, Article 5 of NATO, is so dependent on having the United States remaining bought in on NATO, while at the same time really not wanting to become a party to the war in Iran. So Romania really sort of stuck as a sort of very interesting sort of example there. And I asked him, you know, we're talking now about Trump possibly reprisals on NATO. Are you thinking that maybe you can get some rewards now from the Trump administration for having helped them? And he said that, listen, that they've been building their economic relationship for a very long time. He did say that American companies in the conversations they've had recently will be now more involved in Romania and sort of extracting oil and gas. But going back to this idea of the reprisals for these NATO nations and European countries that did not help the United States. I mean, Donald Trump has really sort of oscillated quite wildly. On the one hand, saying that NATO should be involved on the strikes or in some way in the military operation. On the other, saying that they don't need the help. But this email that is apparently circulating, reported by Reuters, that the United States is thinking about finding ways to suspend or kick Spain out of NATO, ostensibly because, of course, Spain did not allow the base use, but also because they're the only nation within NATO who is not committed to paying that 5% of GDP to defense.
Ollie, last question is just about the vibes of this conference, and I'm curious how much unanimity there is. You mentioned Viktor Orban not there. I don't think that his successor was there either. But how much has that kind of changed the tenor of an event like this one as Europe talks about doing more to defend itself, perhaps without the U.S.'s aid in the way that it has in the past? What was the feel at this conference?
Yeah, I think it changes the tenor pretty dramatically, David. I mean, we think about Viktor Orban has really been the thorn in the side, and a lot of people in other nations have hidden behind Viktor Orban because he was brash enough and bold enough to basically say no to stuff. But there's another point that's also made. It was made by the Belgian prime minister that basically the euphoria over Peter Magyar and the sort of new regime within Hungary may be a little bit overblown, that things may not be just sort of full unanimity going forward, that actually some of the opinions that Viktor Orban held were shared in some ways by some of the other European member states. And we should say that there was also an election in Bulgaria last week. You had a sort of more pro-Kremlin figure that was sort of elected there. And so you have these vacillations, particularly in Eastern Europe, between these sort of very pro-EU governments and these sort of less pro-EU governments. So I don't think that it's sort of a closed question in dealing with some of these questions. But I do think that Viktor Orban, symbolically, after 16 years being out, really makes a big difference in terms of getting some of these initiatives over the line, particularly when it comes to Ukraine. And you could feel it really from Zelensky while he was there over the last 24 hours.
Olive branches, both metaphorical and literal, as we see behind Oliver Crook there, joining us from Cyprus on this Saturday. Oliver, thank you very much.
You're so proud of that.
I was, yeah.
You're so proud of that. He said, I'm going to thank. And I was like, okay, that was why. All right, we're coming up on 8 a.m. in Washington.
And we're going to have Dan Yergin, the vice chair of S&P Global, joining us to talk about energy markets up next on Bloomberg This Weekend, which starts right now.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend, live from New York with David Gura, Christina Ruffini, and Lisa Mateo. The latest headlines, key analysis, big interviews, and the stories that hit home on your days off.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. It is 8 a.m. and we are live from Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios. I'm David Kerr with Christina Ruffini and Lisa Mateo. We are here for the White House Correspondents Association dinner.
That's right.
But a lot unfolding in terms of real news as well.
It's interesting because everyone is here for the dinner, but it's helpful because there's so much news and we get to talk to all our colleagues in person, kind of pick their brains in between, you know, putting on uncomfortable dresses.
We talked about this last hour, roaming around here. Then this news breaks about Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. So that's certainly animating a lot of conversations that we've been having here over the course of the last 24, 36 hours.
And also people are waiting to see what the president is going to do. You know, he's never gone to this dinner before.
Proudly protested and not gone to in the
Proudly
past.
Protested. I was wrong. I said I didn't think he was going to show up, but he's coming, and we'll have to see what he says if he makes some news and how he feels about all the people seated in that ballroom.
Yes, and how they indeed react to what the president has to say. Let's start here with the headlines. Lisa Mateo joining us here in Washington. Lisa.
You got it. Well, the White House says a special envoy intends to meet with Iranian officials in Pakistan this weekend to try and end the more than 8-week war. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The president has decided to dispatch Special Envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner back to Islamabad. The Iranians want to talk. They want to talk in person. And so the president is, as I've said many, many times to all of you, always willing to give diplomacy a chance.
Meanwhile, Iran's top diplomat landed in Pakistan. A spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry said he will meet only with Pakistani officials, with no talks planned with the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, the lead negotiator for the U.S., will not be headed to Pakistan for now. Well, this all comes as the U.S. increased pressure on Iran with its naval blockade, while Israel and Lebanon are set to extend a ceasefire for 3 weeks. President Donald Trump ordered the U.S. Navy to shoot any boat putting mines into the Strait of Hormuz after the military intercepted 2 oil supertankers that tried to evade restrictions on traffic to and from Iran's ports. Now to the war in Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia carried out one of the largest attacks on Ukraine overnight, killing 4 people, leaving over 30 wounded across the country. Ukraine's general staff said Russia launched nearly 50 ballistic missiles and more than 600 drones. And in other news, the Justice Department said it will allow executions by firing squad and restore the use of lethal injections in federal death penalty cases. The Trump administration has been moving to ramp up and expedite capital punishment cases. And U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, she is dropping her investigation into Fed Jay Powell in relation to building the renovation costs overruns by the central bank. Now, it was in his social media post. Pirro said that the Fed's inspector general is going to look into that and that she will restart a criminal investigation if their report calls for it. House Financial Services Committee Chairman French Hill says it's a step in the right direction.
The accusation that Chairman Powell had committed some sort of crime connected with the building construction, or his testimony about it, was a distraction.
지금의 나 이젠 두렵지 않아 세상이 등을 돌려도 나는 나를 놓지 않아 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 더 크게 말할게 내가 걸어온 모든 밤이 나를 빛으로 바꿔냈어 두렵지 않아 세상이 등을 돌려도 나는 나를 놓지 않아 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 더 크게 말할게 내가 걸어온 모든 밤이 나를 빛으로 바꿔냈어 조용히 금이 가던 밤 아무도 모르게 흘러간 시간 웃고 있었지만 내 안은 이미 무너지고 있었어 남겨진 말들 사이로 끝내 닿지 못한 우리 이야기 붙잡고 싶던 나를 이제야 놓아주려 해 이제 알아 흩어진 나의 조각들이 나를 다시 만들고 있다는 걸 이게 나야 지금의 나 더 이상 숨지 않아 부서진 시간 위에 서서 나를 다시 써내려가 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 끝이 아닌 순간 버텨낸 모든 날들이 나를 여기까지 데려왔어 아직 남아있는 흔적 지워지지 않는 너의 그림자 익숙했던 아픔도 이제 나를 멈추지 못해 시간은 흘러가고 나는 조금씩 변해가 그날은 나를 지나 지금의 나를 만나 이제 나라 뒤돌아보는 대신 앞으로 걸어가야 한다는 걸 이게 나야 지금의 나 더 이상 숨지 않아 무너진 기억 위에서도 나는 다시 나를 세워 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 끝이 아닌 순간 견뎌낸 모든 이유가 나를 더 단단하게 만들었어 무너져도 괜찮아 나는 다시 피어나 이 모든 상처까지 나를 완성시키니까 이게 나야 지금의 나 이젠 두렵지 않아 세상이 등을 돌려도 나는 나를 놓지 않아 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 더 크게 말할게 내가 걸어온 모든 밤이 나를 빛으로 바꿔냈어 조용히 금이 가던 밤 아무도 모르게 흘러간 시간 웃고 있었지만 내 안은 이미 무너지고 있었어 남겨진 말들 사이로 끝내 닿지 못한 우리 이야기 붙잡고 싶던 나를 이제야 놓아주 앞으로 걸어가야 한다는 걸 이게 나야 지금의 나 더 이상 숨지 않아 무너진 기억 위에서도 나는 다시 나를 세워 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 끝이 아닌 순간 견뎌낸 모든 이유가 나를 더 단단하게 만들었어 무너져도 괜찮아 나는 다시 피어나 이 모든 상처까지 나를 완성시키니까 이게 나야 지금의 나 이젠 두렵지 않아 세상이 등을 돌려도 나는 나를 놓지 않아 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 더 크게 말할게 내가 걸어온 모든 밤이 나를 빛으로 바꿔냈어 가던 밤 아무도 모르게 흘러간 시간 웃고 있었지만 내 안은 이미 무너지고 있었어. 남겨진 말들 사이로 끝내 닿지 못한 우리 이야기 붙잡고 싶던 나를 이제야 놓아주려 해. 이제 알아 흩어진 나의 조각들이 나를 다시 만들고 있다는 걸. 이게 나야 지금의 나 더 이상 숨지 않아. 부서진 시간 위에 서서 나를 다시 써내려가. 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 끝이 아닌 순간 버텨낸 모든 날들이 나를 여기까지 데려왔어. 아직 남아있는 흔적 지워지지 않는 너의 그림자 익숙했던 아픔도 이제 나를 멈추지 못해. 시간은 흘러가고 나는 조금씩 변해가. 그날은 나를 지나 지금의 나를 만나. 이제 나라 뒤돌아보는 대신 앞으로 걸어가야 한다는 걸. 이게 나야 지금의 나 더 이상 숨지 않아. 무너진 기억 위에서도 나는 다시 나를 세워. 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 끝이 아닌 순간 견뎌낸 모든 이유가 나를 더 단단하게 만들었어. 무너져도 괜찮아. 나는 다시 피어나. 이 모든 상처까지 나를 완성시키니까. 이게 나야 지금의 나 이젠 두렵지 않아. 세상이 등을 돌려도 나는 나를 놓지 않아. 이게 나야 흔들림 없이 더 크게 말할게. 내가 걸어온 모든 밤이 나를 빛으로 바꿔냈어. 조용히 금이 가던 밤
안녕하세요. 마켓 인사이트입니다. 오늘은 최근 미국의 재정 전략과 금융 시스템 변화, 그리고 왜 미국이 지금 부채를 직접 줄이는 길보다 다른 해법,